Hello guys, welcome to Fiction Quest. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto was summoned to One Piece for mating with Boa Hancock and her sisters? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Summons of the Strongest Soul. The world was finally quiet. For a boy who had spent his entire life chasing noise, the roar of a crowd, the clash of steel, the boom of an explosion, the silence was deafening. Naruto Uzumaki stood on the head of what remained of the Hashirama Senju statue, the wind a lonely whisper in his ears. Across the chasm of the waterfall, the decapitated torso of Madara Uchiha stared back. A permanent monument to a war that had bled the world dry. He had won. They had won. The price had been staggering. But the peace he had always screamed about, fought for, and nearly died for was finally here. So why did it feel so empty? He flexed the fingers of his right hand, the pale, synthetic skin a constant reminder of his final battle with Sasuke. His arm was back, but his friend was not. Sasuke was on a journey of redemption, wandering the world to see it with new eyes. Naruto understood. He did, but that didn't make the quiet any less loud. "You're restless, kid," a deep, rumbling voice echoed in the cavern of his mind. It was a familiar, comforting presence, the once feared nine-tailed fox now a gruff but loyal partner. "The world isn't a battlefield anymore. You should be happy." Naruto sighed, the sound snatched away by the wind. "I am happy, Kurama. It's just strange. For years, every morning was about getting stronger. Every day was a mission, a fight, a step closer to bringing Sasuke back. To stopping Akatsuki, to ending the war. Now, he trailed off, looking out at the vast green expanse of the land of fire. Now I wake up and the world doesn't need saving. HMPH. The brats at the academy still need a teacher. The village needs rebuilding. That old woman Tsunade keeps talking about paperwork for your promotion. There's plenty to do. It's not the same," Naruto mumbled. He was a hero. The hero of the Fourth Great Ninja War. People bowed when he walked by. Shopkeepers gave him free ramen. He was respected, admired, even loved. But he felt Lee K. tool put back in its box after the job was done. He was a living symbol, and the weight of it was heavier than any tailed beast bomb. He yearned for something different, something chaotic and unknown. Something that wasn't defined by a prophecy or a destiny. He was so lost in his thoughts, in the familiar ache of a piece he didn't quite fit into, that he almost missed the first strange pull. It was a faint tug, not on his body, but on his very core, on his chakra. He straightened up, his senses, honed by years of sage mode, flaring to life. "Kurama, you feel that?" "I do." The fox's voice had lost its casual gruffness, replaced by a low growl of alarm. "It's not ninjutsu, or genjutsu. It feels old. And it's pulling on you. Hard." The gentle tug intensified into a violent, irresistible summons. The air around Naruto began to shimmer, not with heat, but with a force that warped reality itself. The green of the trees and the blue of the sky started to bleed together into a nauseating swirl of color. He dug his heels into the stone head of the statue, his muscles straining against the invisible force. "What the hell is this?" he grunted, his body glowing with a faint orange aura as he instinctively drew on Kurama's power to anchor himself. "I don't know," Kurama roared in his mind, a thread of genuine panic in his voice. "Something is targeting your life force. It's not just your chakra, Naruto. It's pulling on your very soul." The world dissolved. The roar of the waterfall became a cacophony of a million screaming voices. The wind turned into a physical pressure, crushing him from all sides. He felt his connection to the natural energy of his world sever, like a string being snapped. It was a terrifying, disorienting blindness. For a split second, he was adrift in an abyss of pure, chaotic energy. A maelstrom of light and sound that threatened to tear him apart atom by atom. Then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. The crushing pressure vanished, replaced by gravity's sudden, familiar embrace. He fell a few feet, landing with a light thud on hard-packed dirt. The air was thick, humid, and heavy with the scent of salt and strange, exotic flowers. The silence was gone, replaced by a low, collective gasp that echoed from all around him. Naruto remained crouched for a moment, his head pounding. He took a breath, his senses slowly recalibrating to this new, alien environment. The natural energy here was wild, untamed. It felt like the difference between a placid lake and a raging ocean. Kurama, he sent out mentally, his voice tight with alarm. I'm here, the fox replied, his tone shaken. But our connection to the world, it's gone. This place, this isn't home. Naruto slowly rose to his feet, his blue eyes scanning his surroundings. He was in the center of a vast, circular arena, ringed by towering stone seats carved directly into the side of a mountain. And in those seats, packed shoulder to shoulder, were thousands upon thousands of women. They were tall, statuesque, dressed in revealing leathers and furs, and every single one of them was armed with a bow or a spear. Their eyes, wide with a mixture of shock and disbelief, were all fixed on him. In the center of the arena with him was a monstrous creature, a snake of impossible size, easily dwarfing any summons he had ever seen from Orochimaru. Its scales were a sickly purple, and it was coiled defensively. Its massive head raised as it stared at him with intelligent, wary eyes. A low murmur spread through the crowd, a wave of whispers he couldn't understand. The language was foreign, a series of sharp, melodic clicks and tones. Naruto's mind raced. An enemy summons. A new, large-scale genjutsu. He flared his chakra, testing the illusion, but the world held firm. The sweat beading on his brow from the humidity was real. The scent of the giant snake was real. The piercing stares of 10,000 warrior women were very, very real. This was no illusion. He was somewhere else entirely. On the royal dais, carved into the highest point of the arena, Elder Nyan's jaw was slack. The ritual had worked. She had half believed the ancient texts were mere legend, a desperate hope from a bygone era. The summons of the strongest soul, a forbidden rite that risked tearing a hole in the world, was meant to call forth a man of unparalleled vitality and will, a being worthy of continuity. In the Kuja line when no other could be found. She had expected a king, a giant, a mythical warrior. She had not expected a boy. He looked no older than 20, dressed in strange, bright orange and black clothing. His hair was the color of a brilliant sun, and his eyes were as blue as the deepest sea. He seemed ordinary, and yet, the moment he had appeared, a wave of pure, unadulterated life force had washed over the island. So potent it had made the very stones hum. The air still thrummed with it. Bakura, their fiercest arena beast, a creature that had devoured sea kings, was coiled as far away as it could get, hissing in what Nyan recognized as fear. Beside her, Boa Hancock, the pirate empress and ruler of Amazon Lily, was seething. Her perfect face was a mask of cold fury. This is the one, Nyan. She hissed, her voice dangerously low. This is the great soul you had me risk the sanctity of our island to summon. He is a scrawny, ridiculous-looking child. He is the one the ritual chose, Hebihime, Nyan replied. Her old eyes fixed on the blonde man in the center of the arena. Do not be deceived by his appearance. Feel the air around him. The world itself bends to his presence. Sandersonia and Marigold, Hancock's younger sisters, stood behind her throne, their hands on the hilts of their weapons. He looks weak, sister, Marigold grunted, her wide frame tense. Let us test his weakness, then, Sandersonia added, her tongue flicking out like a snake's. Hancock's lip curled in disgust. The very idea of this ritual had been an insult. That she, the most beautiful woman in the world, whose beauty could bring any man, or woman, to their knees, would need to resort to such a crude summoning to find a mate was preposterous. It was a stain on her pride. But the future of her people was at stake. For that, and that alone, she had acquiesced. Now, looking at the confused boy in the dirt, she felt nothing but rage and disappointment. Ran, she commanded, her voice ringing with absolute authority. Show this whelp the might of Kuja. From the stands, a tall, muscular woman with dark hair tied back in a ponytail leapt down into the arena. She carried a short spear and moved with the fluid grace of a predator. She was Ran, one of their strongest warriors. She approached Naruto cautiously, her haki flaring, searching for an opening. Naruto watched her come. He didn't recognize the fighting stance. But he recognized the intent. He raised his hands in a placating gesture. Hey, I don't want any trouble, he said, his words falling on deaf ears. He tried again, slower, pointing to himself. Naruto. My name is Naruto. Ran ignored him, her face a mask of stern concentration. With a sharp cry, she lunged, her spear aimed directly at his heart. To the thousands of watching Kuja, the movement was a blur of speed and power. To Naruto, it was happening in slow motion. He didn't even move his feet. As the spear tip was a hair's breadth from his chest, he simply tilted his upper body to the side. The spearhead shot past him, the wind of its passage rustling his jacket. Ran's eyes widened in shock at the effortless dodge. She tried to pull her weapon back, but Naruto's left hand shot out and clamped down on the shaft. He didn't just stop it. He held it, his grip absolute. Ran pulled with all her might, her muscles bulging, but the spear didn't move a millimeter. It was like trying to pull a tree from the earth by its branches. Naruto looked at her, his blue eyes holding no malice, only a profound confusion. I really don't want to fight, he said again, his voice calm and even. Frustrated and humiliated, Ran let go of the spear, dropped into a low stance, and aimed a powerful kick at his ribs. He saw it coming a mile away. He released the spear and caught her ankle in his other hand. His grip just as unyielding. He held her there, suspended mid-kick, a look of genuine puzzlement on his face. Okay, look, he said, his voice starting to take on a note of exasperation. I get it, you're strong. Can we talk now? From the royal dais, Hancock watched, her fury mounting. This was not supposed to happen. The man was supposed to be overwhelmed, cowed, defeated. He was supposed to see their strength and understand his position. Instead, he was treating one of their elite warriors like a petulant child. Enough, she boomed, her voice amplified by an unseen force. Echoing across the arena, Naruto looked up towards the sound, his eyes finding the woman on the throne. He let go of Ran's ankle, and she scrambled back, her face flushed with shame. He tossed the spear, and it landed point down in the dirt at her feet. His attention was now completely fixed on the dais. Hancock rose from her throne. The entire arena fell silent, a collective, reverent hush. She was beauty made manifest, a goddess walking among mortals. She moved with an impossible grace, descending the stairs to the arena floor, her massive pet snake, Salome, forming a living seat behind her as she paused. She struck her signature pose, leaning back so far it should have been impossible, pointing a single, elegant finger down at Naruto. She held an unshakable belief in her power. A belief forged from a lifetime of seeing the world bend to her will. Every man she had ever met, from peasants to kings, had fallen victim to her charm. They would turn to stone, their faces frozen in a rictus of lust. This ridiculous boy would be no different. You have trespassed on the sacred island of Amazon Lily, a nation of women where no man is permitted, she declared, her voice dripping with condescension. And you have laid hands on one of my precious warriors. For such crimes, there is only one punishment. She took a deep breath, formed her hands into a heart shape, and blew a kiss. A wide, pink, heart-shaped beam of energy shot from her hands, flying directly at Naruto. Mero mero mellow. The beam washed over him. And nothing happened. Naruto blinked. The pink light dissipated around him like mist. He hadn't dodged it. He hadn't blocked it. He had just stood there, and it had done absolutely nothing. He tilted his head, a frown creasing his brow. Was that supposed to do something? He asked, his voice carrying in the dead silence. Felt like a cool breeze. Kind of nice, actually. It's pretty hot here. A single, audible crack echoed through the arena. As the sound of 1,000 Kuja jaws hitting the floor. On the dais, Elder Nyan's pipe fell from her lips. Sandersonia and Marigold stared, their snake-like features slack with utter astonishment. Hancock's own face was a priceless picture of disbelief. Her power had never failed. Not once. It was as absolute as the tides. She stared at him, her mind refusing to process what her eyes had just seen. Why? She stammered. The first crack in her perfect, arrogant facade. Why are you not stone? Naruto shrugged, his hands stuffed in his pockets now. Why would I be? I don't even know you. Look, I'm getting a little tired of this. Can someone, anyone, just tell me where I am? What was all that light and pulling? 1 minute I'm home, the next I'm in, wherever this is. His voice was no longer pleading. It was firm, demanding answers. The boyish confusion was fading, replaced by the quiet authority of a man who was used to being in control of a situation, and was rapidly growing tired of not being. It was Elder Nyan who finally found her voice. She hobbled down from the dais, her staff tapping against the stone steps. She stopped a respectful distance from Naruto, her ancient eyes scrutinizing him. "You are on Amazon Lily, the island of women," she said, her voice raspy but clear. "And you were brought here by us. Through a sacred, and forbidden, ritual." Naruto's eyes narrowed. "You brought me here. Why?" Nyan glanced at Hancock, whose face was still pale with shock and burgeoning rage. "Our tribe has reached a point of crisis. For generations, we have ventured out to sea, and sometimes, children are born. But the love sickness that affects our people has grown more potent. Fewer and fewer of our warriors return pregnant. Our numbers are dwindling. Without a new generation, the Kuja will cease to exist." She gestured around the arena. "The ritual you were subjected to was our last resort. It does not summon a random man. It seeks out the strongest, most potent soul in the world, a being with a life force so powerful it can guarantee the continuation of our line." She took a deep breath. "You, boy, were summoned to be the husband of our empress, Boa Hancock. To be the father of the next generation of Kuja." Naruto stared at her, processing the words. Husband, father, continuation of the line. The pieces clicked together in his head, and the resulting picture was one he found deeply offensive. All his life, people had wanted something from him. The villagers had wanted him gone. The elders had wanted the 9 tails contained. The world had wanted a savior. Now, these people had ripped him from his home, from his friends, from everything he had ever known, because they wanted a stud. A low, humorless chuckle escaped his lips. It was a dry, weary sound that held no joy. "A husband," he repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. He looked from Nyan to the still reeling Hancock. "You don't summon someone to be a husband. You don't drag them across worlds to be a father. You ask. You get to know them. You build something." His gaze hardened, and for the first time, the thousands of women in the arena felt a flicker of what their prized beast, Bakura, had felt. It wasn't anger. It was a pressure, an immense, suffocating weight that settled over the arena, making the humid air feel thin and hard to breathe. His easy-going demeanor had vanished, peeled back to reveal a core of unyielding, adamantine will. "Let me make one thing perfectly clear," he said, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the stadium. "I am not a tool. I am not an object. And I am not a prize pig you can order up for breeding." He took a step forward, his blue eyes locking onto Hancock's. "My name is Naruto Uzumaki. I am a shinobi of the Hidden Leaf Village. And I am a person." He stopped, his point made. "I refuse." The silence that followed was absolute. No one had ever refused the pirate empress. No man had ever stood before her and spoken with anything other than adoration or terror. To be rejected so bluntly, so publicly, after her ultimate power had already failed so spectacularly, was an insult beyond measure. Hancock's shock finally gave way to pure, unadulterated fury. A crimson flush spread up her neck. Her hands clenched into fists, her knuckles white. A terrifying aura began to radiate from her, a wave of sheer willpower that made the weaker-willed Kuja in the stands faint. "Conqueror's Haki. How dare you?" she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "How dare you look down on me?" She blurred into motion, faster than ran, faster than anyone Naruto had seen in this world. She appeared before him in an instant, her leg raised for a devastating axe kick. Perfume femur, her heel, coated in a shimmering layer of haki that made it as hard as steel. Slammed down with enough force to shatter stone. But it didn't connect. Naruto's hand was there, his palm open, catching her heel an inch above his shoulder. He didn't even flinch. The ground beneath his feet didn't crack. He simply absorbed the full force of the blow as if it were a gentle tap. The shockwave of the blocked impact blasted outwards, kicking up a massive cloud of dust and sending a tremor through the arena floor. Hancock stared, her eyes wide with horrified disbelief. He had caught it. He had caught the full force of her haki-infused kick with one hand. And hadn't even been pushed back a single step. His grip on her ankle was like a vice, a manacle of warm, living flesh. He looked up at her, his expression grim. I told you, I don't want to fight. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it now, a warning. But if you keep trying to break my head open, I'm going to get annoyed. And you don't want me to get annoyed. He held her there for a long, tense moment. The Empress of Amazon Lily held captive by the strange man they had summoned. The power dynamic had been utterly and completely inverted. He was not their prisoner. He was not their prize. He was something else entirely. With a deliberate slowness, he lowered her leg and released her. He took a step back, giving her space. The dust began to settle. The scene was frozen. Naruto, standing calmly with his hands in his pockets again. Hancock, breathing heavily, her rage warring with a new, terrifying emotion, fear, and an entire island of legendary female warriors, rendered utter. Silent spectators to a confrontation that had shattered every rule of their world. Naruto's gaze swept from Hancock back to Elder Nyan. Look, he said, his voice returning to a more reasonable, if strained, tone. You brought me here against my will. I can't get home. You need what you need. Neither of us is going to get what we want by trying to kill each other. He ran a hand through his spiky blonde hair. A gesture of pure exasperation. I'll make you a deal. I'll stay here. For now, I'll learn about your island, your world, whatever this place is. And in return, you don't try to kick my head in. And you help me figure out a way back to my home. I'll be a guest, nothing more. We can talk about everything else later. When we're not trying to turn each other into statues or paste. Elder Nyan looked at Hancock, whose pride was a tangible, wounded thing. But even she could not deny the reality of the situation. The man was untouchable. Forcing him was not an option. Attacking him was suicide. Nyan gave a slow, deliberate nod. That is acceptable, she conceded. The tension in the arena broke, but it did not dissipate. It merely transformed into a new, uncertain quiet. Naruto nodded once, the deal sealed. He was a guest, a defiant, unwilling, and terrifyingly powerful guest in a nation of women who had summoned him for a purpose he utterly rejected. The quiet had been broken, all right. His new life, it seemed, was going to be anything but. Miles away, on a small, nondescript island shrouded in a permanent fog, a man in a pristine white suit and a blank, expressio NLESS mask adjusted the dials on a complex piece of machinery. The device, a prototype long-range energy sensor, was buzzing alarmingly, a needle buried deep in the red. Agent Strix reporting, the M. And spoke into a transponder snail on his wrist, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. Go ahead, Strix, a cold, clipped voice replied from the snail. Sir, approximately 17 minutes ago, I stirred an energy event of unprecedented scale. The signature is unlike any known devil fruit, hockey bloom, or ancient weapon activation. There was a pause on the other end. Source. The spike was localized to the Calm Belt. Specifically, to the coordinates of Kura Island. Another, longer pause. Amazon Lily. Correct, sir. The energy level was unclassifiable. It spiked, held for approximately 3 seconds, and then vanished. It tore a temporary distortion in local space-time. I have never seen anything like it. The voice from the snail was silent for a moment, contemplating. A new weapon developed by the Kuja. Unlikely. They are primitives who rely on superstition and brute force. Continue monitoring. Log the data. Transmit it directly to my office. I will deliver this report to the 5 elders personally. Any anomaly related to that island is a matter of the highest security. Understood. Agent Strix replied. He turned back to his console, his gloved fingers flying across the keys. Archiving the impossible data spike. He didn't know what had happened on that island of warrior women. But he knew, with the cold certainty of a government agent, that the world had just changed. And his job was to report on the cracks as they appeared. The first crack had just been logged. The report was on its way to the holy land of Mary Geois. The gears of the world government had begun to turn. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Scars of the Serpent, Empathy of the Fox. Naruto woke to the jarring squawk of a strange, brightly colored bird outside his window. For a hazy, disoriented second, he expected to see the familiar wooden ceiling of his apartment in Konoha. Instead, he saw a high, vaulted roof woven from petrified wood and bound with thick, verdant vines. The bed he lay in was surprisingly soft, the sheets made of a silk so fine it felt like cool water against his skin. The room was spacious and Spartan, clearly a guest chamber, but one built for a giant. Everything, the door, the window, the single wooden table, was scaled to someone at least a foot taller than him. He sat up, the events of the previous day crashing back into his mind with the force of a Chidori. The summons, the arena, the 10,000 warrior women, the pirate empress. He had been ripped from his world to be a mate. The thought still sent a jolt of indignant anger through him. A soft knock came at the door. Before he could answer, it opened, and a young Kuja warrior entered carrying a tray of food. She was maybe 15, with wide, curious eyes, and she moved with a nervous energy that was a stark contrast to the stoic hostility he'd seen in the arena. She placed the tray on the table, her gaze darting towards him and then quickly away, as if looking at him too long was a crime. Thanks, Naruto said, swinging his legs out of bed. The girl jumped, startled that he had spoken. She bowed stiffly and scurried out of the room without a word, pulling the massive door shut behind her. Naruto stared after her, a frown on his face. He walked over to the tray. It was laden with exotic fruits he didn't recognize, roasted meat from some kind of sea creature, and a steaming mug of a dark, bitter-smelling liquid. He took a bite of a purple, star-shaped fruit. It was sweet, with a tangy aftertaste that made his mouth water. As he ate, he let his senses expand, a basic ninja technique he'd mastered as a child. He could feel the life all around him, the thousands of women in the city-state carved into the mountain, their energies a mix of suspicion, fear, and a buzzing curiosity all aimed in his direction. He was a foreign object in the heart of their society, a male virus in a sterile environment. They fear you, Kurama rumbled in his mind, his voice a low thrum of amusement. Yesterday you were a curiosity. After you stopped the Empress's kick with one hand, you became a monster. I don't want them to fear me, Naruto muttered, picking up a piece of the roasted fish. I just want some answers. And a way home. That Empress, Hancock, her power is strange. It's not genjutsu. It felt like it was trying to prey on your emotions. Good thing you have none for her. Naruto grunted in agreement. He felt nothing for the arrogant Empress but irritation. Her beauty was undeniable, like a perfectly carved statue, but it was just as cold and lifeless. He'd met more warmth in Zabuza Momochi. He finished his meal and pulled on his familiar orange and black jacket. The fabric felt like a piece of home, a tangible link to a world that felt a universe away. He needed to move, to explore. Staying cooped up in this room would drive him mad. He opened the giant door and stepped out onto a wide balcony overlooking the Kuja city. The view was breathtaking. The city was built vertically. Houses and plazas carved into the concave face of a titanic mountain, all centered around the arena where he'd arrived. Rope bridges swayed in the humid breeze, connecting different levels. Waterfalls cascaded down the rock face, feeding into lush, terraced gardens. It was a masterpiece of natural architecture, a place of stunning, wild beauty. And everywhere he looked, he saw women. Training with bows, carrying goods, talking in small groups. As soon as they noticed him, conversations would stop. Heads would turn. He was the center of all attention, yet completely isolated. He decided to walk. He leapt from his balcony, landing lightly on a bridge 50 feet below. A group of women gasped and scrambled back, their hands flying to the bows on their backs. Naruto just gave them a small, awkward wave and kept moving. His hands shoved in his pockets. He wandered through the city, a ghost in broad daylight. He passed a forge where a muscular woman was hammering a glowing piece of steel into a spearhead. He saw a school where young girls were being taught to fletch arrows. He saw healers grinding herbs with stone pestles. It was a complete, self-sufficient society. His presence was a disruption. But his demeanor was disarming. He didn't leer. He didn't posture. He just walked with a quiet purpose, his gaze curious but respectful. He watched a group of children playing a game with painted stones. And when one of the stones rolled to his feet, he simply picked it up and rolled it back. The girl who owned it stared at him with wide eyes before snatching it and running back to her friends, who all broke out in a fit of whispers and giggles. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the fear began to be replaced by curiosity. He wasn't the raging beast they had expected. He was just a man. A strange, sun-haired man who seemed more lost than threatening. But not everyone was disarmed. He was crossing a wide, stone plaza when two figures blocked his path. They were tall, imposing, and radiated an aura of possessive hostility. Boa Sandersonia and Boa Marigold. Your walk ends here, man, Marigold grunted, her thick arms crossed over her chest. Her voice was a low growl, and her eyes were narrowed into slits. Sandersonia stood beside her, a cruel smile playing on her lips. Her long, slender body was coiled with tension, like a snake ready to strike. Our sister was merciful yesterday, she hissed, her tongue flicking out to taste the air. She is the Empress. Her pride was wounded by a filthy commoner like you. We cannot allow that to stand. Naruto sighed, the peaceful mood of his walk evaporating. Look, I have no problem with your sister. I have no problem with any of you. I'm just trying to get my bearings. You have no right to walk freely in our home, Marigold shot back. You are here for one purpose. Until you accept it, you are a prisoner, not a guest. We will put you in your place, Sandersonia added, her smile widening. We will show you the true horror of the Gorgon sisters. Perhaps a taste of real fear will make you more compliant. Naruto's easy-going expression hardened. The word, compliant, rubbed him the wrong way. It was the same attitude everyone who had ever tried to control him had used. Danzo, the village elders, Pain, I already told your sister, he said, his voice dropping an octave. I'm not a tool, and I'm not a prisoner. He looked from one sister to the other, his blue eyes sharp and clear. If you want to fight, fine. But don't expect me to roll over for you. Let's get this over with. Sandersonia's smile became a predatory grin. Cocky. I will enjoy breaking that spirit. The plaza cleared in an instant. The Kuja who had been watching from a distance scrambled for safety, knowing what was coming. The Gorgon sisters rarely fought together. And when they did, it was never a simple sparring match. Marigold was the first to move. Despite her bulk, she was deceptively fast, charging forward like a bull. She threw a punch aimed at his face. Her fist coated in a shimmering, invisible layer of armament hockey. It was a blow designed to pulp stone. Naruto didn't try to block it. He simply swayed his head to the left, the fist passing an inch from his cheek. The wind from the missed punch was a physical slap. Before Marigold could recover, he dropped low, sweeping her feet out from under her. The massive woman shed to the stone plaza with a ground-shaking thud. At the same time, Sandersonia attacked from his blind spot. Her green hair, as if alive, shot out in thick, serpentine tendrils, aiming to constrict him. But Naruto didn't need to see her. He could feel her. He pushed off the ground, backflipping high into the air, the living hair passing harmlessly beneath him. He landed 50 feet away, his stance relaxed. His eyes narrowed in concentration. They were strong, very strong. Their coordination was excellent. Is that all? He called out, his voice calm. He wanted to see what they were really capable of. A low, guttural snarl came from Marigold as she got to her feet. You haven't seen anything yet. Let's show him, Marigold. Sandersonia shrieked, her body beginning to contort. Let's show him why they call us monsters. A wave of palpable dread washed over the plaza. The Kuja watching from the rooftops gasped in collective horror. The Gorgon sisters were about to reveal their greatest, most shameful secret. Marigold's body bloated, her skin turning a mottled brown and gray as she grew in size, her form shifting into that of a gargantuan king cobra. Sandersonia's form elongated and twisted, her limbs melding into a massive, yellow-spotted anaconda. They towered over him, true monsters from myth, their devil fruit powers on full display. Marigold, now a giant cobra woman, opened her maw and spat a stream of thick, purple liquid, venom. It sizzled as it hit the stone, eating through it like acid. Naruto was already moving, a blur of orange. He knew he couldn't fight them with just taijutsu anymore. This wasn't a sparring match. This was a real fight. He stopped, planting his feet. He closed his eyes for a split second, drawing in the vast, wild natural energy of this new world. It rushed into him like a tidal wave, far more potent and chaotic than the energy at home, but he tamed it with the ease of long practice. When he opened his eyes, orange pigment had formed around them, the mark of a perfect sage. His perception exploded. The world came alive. He could feel the flow of the wind, the vibrations in the stone, the bioelectric fields of the two giant snake women before him. He could sense the chemical makeup of Marigold's venom, the tensile strength of Sandersonia's hair snakes. It was like seeing the world in 1,000 different spectrums at once. "All right," he said, his voice resonating with a new depth. Round 2. Sandersonia's hair, now transformed into dozens of writhing, white-headed snakes, shot towards him. Hebigami Tsuki. Yamata no Orochi. It was a sea of fangs and scales. A seemingly unavoidable attack, but for Naruto in Sage mode, it was a simple equation of trajectories and speeds. He didn't just dodge, he moved through them. He weaved between the lashing snake heads with impossible grace, his movements so fluid he seemed to be made of water. He was untouched, a phantom dancing through a forest of death. He appeared before the giant Sandersonia. His fist cocked back. He wasn't aiming for her body. He was aiming for one of her hair snakes. He punched, his fist connecting with a sharp crack. The snake head reeled back, stunned. He wasn't just fast, he was precise. He was treating her power not as a monstrous curse, but as a technique to be analyzed and dismantled. "My turn," he said. He formed a hand sign. Shadow Clone Jutsu. With a series of pops, a dozen Narutos appeared in the plaza. The sisters recoiled in shock. "What is this sorcery?" Marigold bellowed. The clones didn't hesitate. Half of them engaged Sandersonia, using their numbers to distract and counter her hair snakes, while the other half charged Marigold. They swarmed her, leaping onto her massive frame, running up her arms and back, a disruptive tide of orange. "Get off me," she roared, trying to shake them off, but they were like tenacious ants. The real Naruto took his chance. He appeared above Marigold, a spiraling sphere of pure, blue chakra forming in his palm. A Rasengan. It was small, controlled, not the planet-cracking versions he could make, but more than enough. Sandersonia saw the danger. "Marigold, behind you," but it was too late. Naruto slammed the Rasengan into Marigold's back. It wasn't a killing blow. He controlled the impact, using its explosive, grinding force to throw her off balance and send her crashing into her sister. The two giant snake women collided in a tangle of scales and limbs, their monstrous forms shaking the very foundations of the city. The clones dispersed into smoke. Naruto landed softly on the far side of the plaza. The fight was over. He had an opening. He could form a Rasenshuriken and end this permanently. He could create a tailed beast bomb and vaporize the plaza. He had 100 ways to win. To utterly dominate and humiliate them. He did none of them. He simply stood there, his sage mode fading, the orange pigmentation receding from his eyes. He let his hands fall to his sides. "Is that enough?" he asked, his voice quiet but firm. "Or do you want to keep going? Because I can do this all day." Sandersonia and Marigold untangled themselves, their devil fruit forms receding, shrinking back into their human shapes. They were bruised, battered, and breathing heavily. But the physical wounds were nothing compared to the damage to their pride. They had used their ultimate, monstrous forms. Their most terrifying secret, and he had treated it like a puzzle. He hadn't flinched. He hadn't been scared. He had analyzed it, dismantled it, and defeated it with an ease that was more terrifying than any show of brute force. And then, he had shown them mercy. He had refused to land the finishing blow. Sandersonia stared at him, her usual cruel smirk gone, replaced by a look of stunned disbelief. Marigold just gaped, her mind struggling to comprehend what had happened. He hadn't just beaten them. He had respected them. He had fought their monstrous powers as if they were just another set of high-level techniques. And in doing so, had given them a strange, unexpected form of validation. We yield," Sandersonia managed to say, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. Naruto gave a single, sharp nod. The tension in the plaza finally broke. He had fought the Gorgon sisters and won. He had cemented his status on the island. He was not just a powerful man. He was a warrior who understood the calculus of battle, and more importantly, the dignity of his opponents. "The hoof of the soaring dragon." Elder Nyan spoke the words in a hushed, reverent whisper, as if saying them too loud might summon the devil. She and Naruto were sitting in her small, cluttered hut, away from the prying eyes of the city. The air was thick with the smell of dried herbs and old parchment. After the duel, Nyan had sought him out, her expression unreadable. She had seen how he fought, how he had won, and how he had chosen not to humiliate the sisters. She had decided he was worthy of the truth. It is the symbol of the world nobles, she continued, her voice trembling slightly with an ancient rage. The celestial dragons. Naruto listened, his expression serious. He didn't know these names, but he recognized the tone. It was the same way people in his world spoke of Madara Uchiha, a name synonymous with disaster. They consider themselves gods among men, Nyan explained, her wrinkled hands clenched into fists. They live in the holy land of Mary Geoise, above the red line. They can do whatever they want. Take whatever they want. Kill whomever they want, with absolute impunity. To them, the rest of us are not even human. We are insects. She paused, taking a shaky breath. Many years ago, when Hancock was just a child of 12, she and her sisters were on their first voyage as apprentice Kuja pirates. Their ship was found, not by marines, not by rival pirates, by a celestial dragon's vessel. Naruto's posture straightened, a cold knot formed in his stomach. He knew where this was going. They were captured, Nyan said, her voice cracking. Hancock, Sandersonia, and Marigold. They were taken to Mary Geoise and sold as slaves. For 4 years, they endured hell. A hell you and I cannot even imagine. They were toys for the nobles, things to be tormented for their amusement. On their backs, they were branded with the hoof of the soaring dragon, the mark of ownership. A mark that says, I am less than human. I belong to the gods. The pieces clicked into place. Hancock's extreme arrogance, her hatred of men, her fear of anyone getting close to her. The sisters' fierce, almost fanatical protectiveness, and their monstrous powers. During their time there, Nyan continued, as a cruel form of entertainment, their masters forced them to eat devil fruits. Cursed treasures of the sea that grant powers at the cost of the user's ability to swim. They were told it would be funny to watch them struggle with these new, freakish bodies. That is the origin of their Gorgon forms. It is not just a power to them. It is a reminder of their deepest shame and suffering. Naruto said nothing. He just stared at the wooden table, his knuckles white where his hands rested. He thought of his own childhood. The whispers, the hateful stares, the loneliness, being treated as a monster because of the fox sealed inside him. He had thought his pain was unique, a singular burden. But hearing this was a different level of cruelty. His burden had been born of fear. Theirs was born of malice. They eventually escaped, thanks to a man named Fisher Tiger, Nyan finished. He climbed the red line with his bare hands and set all the slaves free. A great hero, but they could never escape the scars. Hancock uses her beauty and her power as a shield, to ensure no one can ever have power over her again. She believes if she is powerful enough, arrogant enough, she can keep the entire world at arm's length. Especially men, who to her represent the very face of her tormentors. Naruto finally looked up, his blue eyes dark with a storm of emotions. The mark on their backs. They told the Kuja it was the mark of a Gorgon they killed, and they were cursed to have its eyes on their backs. That anyone who saw it would be turned to stone. Nyan nodded sadly. A lie, born of desperation. A lie to protect their secret, to hide their shame from their own people. Only I know the truth. And now, you. Naruto stood up. Where is she? He asked, his voice flat. She often goes to her bathing chambers when she is distressed, Nyan said, her old eyes watching him closely. But be warned, boy. Knowing her pain does not mean she will welcome your pity. I'm not going to give her pity, Naruto replied, his voice a low growl. Pity is useless. He turned and left the hut. His strides long and purposeful. He wasn't angry at Hancock anymore. He wasn't irritated. He understood. And what he understood filled him with a cold, clear, and focused rage that he hadn't felt since he faced down pain in the ruins of his village. He found her in a vast, open-air bath carved into the highest point of the mountain. Steam rose from the perfumed water, mingling with the sweet scent of the jungle. It was a place of serene beauty, but it felt tense, fragile. Hancock was there, her back to him, submerged to her waist in the water. Her long, Black hair was loose, cascading down her shoulders. Her body was rigid. I ordered that no one was to disturb me, she said, her voice sharp and brittle, without turning around. They were too scared to stop me, Naruto replied, his voice echoing slightly in the grotto. He walked to the edge of the pool, stopping a few feet from the water. So, the beast finally shows its teeth, she sneered, her voice dripping with venom. Have you come to gloat? You defeated my sisters. You have proven your strength. What more do you want? Do you expect me to fall at your feet now? No, Naruto said simply. His calm response seemed to enrage her more. She spun around to face him, her beautiful face contorted with a mix of fury and desperation. Then why are you here? To mock me, to stare at me like all the other filthy, worthless men. To see if you can finally break me. I'm here because I understand, he said, his voice quiet but carrying an immense weight. You understand nothing, she shrieked, her control finally shattering. Water sloshed around her as she clenched her fists. You are a man. You were born free. You have known nothing of humiliation, of being treated like livestock. You cannot possibly understand what it is to be a monster. Naruto held her gaze, his own eyes reflecting a deep, ancient pain. You think so, he said, his voice soft but unwavering. The day I was born, a monster was sealed inside my body. The nine-tailed fox. It had just destroyed my village and killed hundreds of people, including my parents. From the moment I could walk, I was an outcast. The adults whispered about me. They led their children away when I came near. They looked at me with fear and hatred. They didn't see a boy. They saw the demon fox. They called me a monster. A curse. Hancock's tirade died in her throat. She stared at him, her lips slightly parted. I grew up completely alone, Naruto continued, his voice thick with the memory of it. No friends. No family. I used to pull pranks, cause trouble, anything to get people to notice me. Even if it was with anger. Because being yelled at was better than being invisible. You talk about being a monster. I spent the first 12 years of my life believing I was one, without ever knowing why. He took a step closer, his gaze softening with an empathy that was so pure, so genuine, it was disarming. I get it, Hancock. Using your power, your attitude, as a shield. Pushing everyone away so they can't get close enough to hurt you. Making yourself so untouchable that no one can ever have power over you again. I did the same thing. I acted like a loud-mouthed idiot so no one could see how lonely I was. He was standing at the very edge of the water now. He could see it, just below the surface of the water on her back. A dark, ugly shape. The hoof of the soaring dragon. The brand. Seeing it made Nyan's story brutally, horribly real. The abstract horror became a physical scar. A switch flipped in his mind. The empathy for her pain remained, but it was now joined by a terrifying Arctic rage directed at the ones who had put it there. Hancock saw the shift in his eyes. She instinctively tried to cover herself, a lifetime of shame and fear washing over her. Don't look, she cried, her voice breaking. But Naruto didn't look with disgust. He didn't look with pity. His eyes were blazing with a righteous, protective fire she had never seen before. The celestial dragons, he said. His voice a low, dangerous whisper. He had spoken their name. The name she had spent her life trying to forget. She flinched as if struck. Tears welled in her eyes, threatening to spill over. The Empress was gone. In her place was a terrified, broken slave girl. Naruto crouched down at the edge of the pool, bringing himself to her level. He didn't reach for her. He didn't offer a comforting touch. He gave her something far more valuable. Hancock, he said, and for the first time, he used her name. His voice was soft, but it carried the unshakable certainty of a vow. Listen to me. That mark on your back, it doesn't define you. The powers you were forced to eat, they don't make you a monster. They are a part of you now, and they make you strong. He looked directly into her eyes, and she saw the absolute conviction in his. You're not a slave anymore. You're the empress of this island. You're a warrior, and you're not alone. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a near-silent promise, a vow made between two souls who had been branded as monsters. I swear to you, on my life, and on the life of everyone I've ever cared about, he whispered. The words hanging in the steamy air like particles of ice. If anyone bearing the mark of that dragon, anyone who calls themselves a god, ever dares to set foot near you, or your sisters, or this island, I will personally erase them from existence. I will grind them into dust so fine the world will forget they ever drew breath. It wasn't a boast, it was a statement of fact. A promise of annihilation. Hancock stared at him, tears finally streaming down her perfect face. She had spent her life terrified of men. They were creatures of lust, of power, of ownership. They saw her and wanted to possess her. But this man, this strange, sun-haired man from another world, he looked at her, saw her deepest shame, her most painful secret, and he didn't want to own her. He didn't pity her, he wanted to avenge her. In that moment, something inside her, a wall of ice built over a decade of trauma, didn't just crack. It shattered. For the first time since she was a child, she looked at a man and didn't feel fear or disgust. She felt safe. The chamber of the five elders was a place outside of time. Silent, opulent, and suffocating with the weight of centuries of absolute power. Saint J. Garcia Saturn, a man with a star-shaped scar and a gaze as cold as the void, reviewed the report from Cipher Pole on a small, paper-like screen. The other four elders watched him, their ancient faces impassive. An energy signature of unclassifiable origin, Saturn stated, his voice a dry rasp. A temporal spatial distortion, originating from Amazon Lily. He looked up, his eyes sweeping over his colleagues. The Kuja do not possess this level of technology or power. This is an outside variable. An invasion. A weapon test from a rival kingdom. One of the others mused. Perhaps, Saturn said, his fingers steepled. But the timing is inconvenient. The reverie is approaching. The world is already unstable. Blackbeard's movements, the Revolutionary Army's whispers. We cannot afford a new, unknown power emerging from the calm belt. He paused, his gaze turning hard. And for it to appear on the island of a warlord, even one as petulant as Boa Hancock, is a direct challenge to our authority. His philosophy was simple. The world had a divine order. The celestial dragons were at its apex. The world government was the instrument of their will. Anything that threatened that order, any power that did not originate from it or was not sanctioned by it, was not just an enemy. It was blasphemy, a heresy to be purged. Send a fleet, one of the elders suggested. A demonstration. Saturn shook his head. No, a simple demonstration is a conversation. This requires a statement. He turned to a nearby Den Mushi. Get me Vice Admiral Onagumo. His fleet is the closest, patrolling the paradise entrance to the New World. The connection was made instantly. Saint Saturn, sir, it is an honor, a gruff voice crackled from the snail. Vice Admiral, Saturn said, his voice leaving no room for argument. You were to divert your fleet to the calm belt. Proceed to Amazon Lily. You were to perform a reconnaissance in force. Engage the Kuja, test their defenses, ascertain the source of this energy anomaly. He leaned closer to the snail, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial chill. Your official orders are reconnaissance. Your real orders, Vice Admiral, are to remind the Snake Woman and her tribe of their place. If you encounter the source of this anomaly, and it proves hostile, you have my full authority to purge the heresy. Do you understand? A thrill of ruthless excitement was palpable in Onagumo's voice. Loud and clear, sir. It would be my pleasure to dispense the world government's justice. The line went dead. Saint Saturn leaned back in his chair. Let's see what this anomaly is made of. He murmured to the silent room. Let's see how it fares against a wave of absolute justice. On the seas of the Grand Line, a dozen marine battleships changed course, their prows turning towards the deadliest, most forbidden stretch of ocean in the world. They sailed not just with cannons and steel, but with the unshakable conviction of fanatics, heading straight for an isla. ND that was now home to a power they could not possibly comprehend. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The First Wave of Justice. A week of tense, fragile peace settled over Amazon Lily. It was a peace born not of tranquility, but of uncertainty. Naruto had become a fixture in the city, a walking paradox the Kuja still didn't know how to process. He trained in the mornings, his movements a blur of controlled power that drew crowds of silent, watching warriors. He spent afternoons with Elder Nyan, grilling her for every scrap of information about this new world. about the Grand Line, the Four Blues, the world government, Marines, pirates, devil fruits, hockey. It was like learning the world from scratch, and he was a voracious student. His relationship with the Gorgon sisters had undergone a seismic shift. Marigold and Sandersonia, once his most vocal antagonists, now treated him with a grudging, wary respect. He had defeated them, yes, but he had not shamed them. He spoke to them not as monsters, but as fellow warriors. Even asking Sandersonia about the intricacies of her devil fruit, discussing its potential with a tactical curiosity she'd never encountered. He was treating her curse like a unique form of ninjutsu. And the simple act of intellectual respect was more disarming than any physical blow. His interactions with Hancock were the most changed, and the most private. They rarely spoke in public. Instead, she would find him in the quiet hours after dusk, on the high balconies overlooking the jungle. Their conversations were stilted at first, explorations across a minefield of trauma and pride. He never brought up her past. He didn't need to. He just sat with her, a quiet, solid presence, and talked about his own world. He told her about Team 7, about his rivalry with Sasuke, about his perverted but wise master Jiraiya, about his dream of becoming Hokage. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was just sharing his life, piece by piece, a gesture of trust. For Hancock, a woman, and who had never known a man to be anything other than a threat or a sycophant, this was a revelation. He saw her, the woman behind the Empress, and he wasn't demanding anything in return. The love CKNESS, that felled so many Kuja was a foreign concept to him, but in its place, a different, more profound connection was taking root, a bond forged in shared pain and mutual respect. She found herself seeking out his company, drawn to the unwavering calm in his blue eyes. It was during one of these quiet evenings that the peace was shattered. They were on the cliffs at the edge of the island, watching the twin moons of this strange world rise over the dark, unnervingly still waters of the calm belt. Suddenly, a Kuja scout, her face pale with alarm, landed beside them. Hebihime-sama, Naruto-sama, she gasped, her voice tight with panic. Ships. On the horizon. Naruto and Hancock were on their feet in an instant. They followed the scout to the highest watchtower, where a powerful telescope was aimed out at sea. Hancock peered through the eyepiece first. Her body went rigid. Marines, she hissed, the single word filled with venom. A full fleet. A dozen battleships. Naruto took her place, his eye to the lens. He saw them clearly now. 12 massive vessels, their sails emblazoned with the seagull symbol of the Marines, cutting through the water. But they weren't being rowed. They were moving under their own power. Their hulls plated with a dark, unfamiliar stone. They're bypassing the Sea Kings, Naruto noted, his voice grim. The air around the ships shimmered, a strange distortion that kept the colossal sea monsters at bay. Seastone, Hancock explained, her fists clenched. It radiates the same energy as the sea itself. It masks their presence. This is a dedicated invasion force. This isn't a patrol. She looked at Naruto, her eyes wide with a flicker of the old fear. They've come for you. News spread through the city like wildfire. The conch horns blew, their mournful cry a call to arms. The peaceful rhythm of the island was replaced by the frantic energy of a hive under attack. Warriors swarmed the battlements, knocking hockey-infused arrows to their bows. The air crackled with tension and the low thrum of thousands of women preparing for a desperate defense. Naruto stood on the watchtower, the wind whipping through his blonde hair. He could feel their fear. This wasn't a duel in the arena. This was a war machine, come to break their home. Get your warriors ready, he said to Hancock, his voice cutting through the rising panic. Prepare the outer defenses. I'll handle the welcome party. Handle them. Sandersonia protested, having joined them on the tower. Naruto, that's a vice admiral's fleet. It's an entire Buster Call's worth of firepower. Naruto turned to them, and the sheer, unshakable confidence in his eyes silenced them. It wasn't arrogance. It was certainty. I fought a war against an army of 10,000 undead shinobi and a literal goddess. A dozen big boats isn't a war. It's a Tuesday. He looked at Hancock, a silent promise passing between them. He was not just a guest anymore. This was his fight now. He had made a vow. Before they could say another word, he was gone. He leapt from the high tower, a flash of orange against the darkening sky. He didn't fall towards the city. He shot towards the sea, landing on the water's surface with a light splash. Then he began to run, his feet kicking up spray as he sprinted across the surface of the calm belt, a lone figure charging headlong towards a fleet of warships. The Kuja on the battlements watched, their hearts in their throats. They had seen his power in the arena, but this was madness. 1 man against 12 battleships. Hancock gripped the stone railing of the tower, her knuckles white. She had absolute faith in her people's strength, but this was the world government. This was the monolithic power that had haunted her nightmares. But as she watched Naruto's solitary figure race across the water, a different feeling bloomed in her chest, overriding the fear. A fierce, wild hope. On the deck of the lead battleship, Vice Admiral Onagumo, a grim man with EIG. HT spider-like legs protruding from his back, watched the approaching figure through a telescope. He was a zone-type devil fruit user, a Spider-Man, and his multiple eyes gave him exceptional vision. 1 man, he grunted, a cruel smile twisting his lips. The Kuja send a single man to meet us. Is this their anomaly? He runs on water. A clever trick, but a trick nonetheless. He turned to his communications officer. All ships, load cannon, high explosive rounds. On my mark, fire a full broadside. Let's see how his trick holds up against 10,000 pounds of ordnance. The cannons swiveled, their black maws tracking Naruto's approach. He was a small target, moving incredibly fast, but the sheer volume of fire would be impossible to dodge. He's in range, sir. A spotter called out. Fire! Onagumo roared. The world erupted in thunder. 100 cannons fired at once, a wave of smoke and flame blasting from the sides of the ships. 100 cannonballs, each the size of a man's torso, screamed through the air. Converging on Naruto's position, it was enough firepower to level a small town in a single volley. Naruto saw them coming. He didn't slow down. He didn't even change course. He just kept running, his hands forming a single, familiar seal. Shadow Clone Jutsu. In a split second, the lone figure of Naruto became 1,000. An army of orange-clad shinobi, all running full tilt across the water. They fanned out, a massive wave of bodies that completely absorbed the cannonball barrage. Clones erupted in puffs of smoke as the explosives hit, the concussive force turning the sea into a churning cauldron of fire and water. But for every clone that was destroyed, 10 more seemed to take its place, their numbers overwhelming the targeted assault. On the flagship, the Marines stared in stunned silence. The smoke cleared, and the man was still coming, now flanked by hundreds of identical copies, their charge unbroken. What in the hell? Onagumo breathed, his multiple eyes wide. Reload. Fire at will. The cannons began to roar again, a frantic, chaotic barrage this time. But it was useless. The clones were too numerous, too fast. They were a living shield, a tidal wave of orange that was closing the distance with terrifying speed. The real Naruto was in the center of the swarm. As his clones absorbed the brunt of the attack, he focused. He gathered the wild, potent natural energy of this world. And the world responded with an eager fury. The orange pigment of Sage Mode painted his eyes, and he could feel the power thrumming through his veins. This world's natural energy was raw, powerful, and it sang to his sage abilities. He held out his right hand. A pinprick of white light appeared in his palm, surrounded by 4 thin, black blades of wind, all spinning at an impossible speed. The sound it made was a high-pitched shriek, like 1,000 birds screaming at once, a sound that cut through the thunder of the cannons. Wind style. Recentrican. He was close now, barely 100 yards from the lead ship. With a primal roar that was amplified by sage energy, he hurled it. The Recentrican flew through the air, a miniature, shrieking star. It didn't fly straight. It wobbled, then expanded, growing to the size of a house, a colossal, spinning vortex of wind blades. Onagumo's blood ran cold. Brace for impact, he screamed, his voice cracking with the first hint of genuine terror. The Recentrican hit the flagship dead center. There was no explosion. Not at first. There was only the sound of shredding. The attack didn't detonate, it ground. The spinning wind blades, each one a microscopic scalpel, tore through the seastone-plated hull like it was wet paper. It shredded wood, steel, cannons, and men with equal, indiscriminate fury. For a horrifying second, the entire battleship seemed to be consumed by a sphere of white, grinding energy. Then, it detonated. A massive dome of wind erupted outwards, blasting the sea away in a perfect circle, creating a momentary crater in the ocean. The shockwave, a physical wall of force, slammed into the two ships flanking the flagship. Their masts snapped like twigs. Their hulls groaned and splintered. When the wind died down, there was nothing left of the lead ship but a cloud of splinters and a few pieces of floating debris. Vice Admiral Onagumo's flagship, and everyone on it, had been completely and utterly vaporized. A stunned, horrified silence fell over the remaining 11 ships. Their commander was gone. Their lead vessel was annihilated by a single attack from a single man. He calculated reconnaissance in force had just become a slaughter. Back on the cliffs of Amazon Lily, the Kuja stared, their mouths agape. They had seen the barrage. They had seen the impossible army of clones. And they had seen the shrieking star of light that had erased a battleship from existence. The power was biblical. It was the power of a god of destruction. Hancock gripped the railing so tightly her knuckles were bloodless. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but it was not with fear. It was with a dizzying, terrifying exhilaration. The man who had promised to protect her was not just a powerful warrior. He was a force of nature. The fight wasn't over. It had just begun. Naruto landed on the deck of the nearest crippled battleship. The Marines on board, their faces pale with shock and terror, scrambled back. They were trained soldiers, veterans of the Grand Line, but they had never seen anything like this. Monster! One of them screamed, firing his rifle. The bullet bounced harmlessly off a thin, invisible layer of chakra cloaking Naruto's skin. Naruto's expression was grim. He wasn't enjoying this. These men were just soldiers, following orders. But they were here to destroy a place he had sworn to protect. He had no choice. Get off this ship, he said, his voice cold and hard. Abandon it. Go home. That's your only warning. His warning was met with a defiant cry as a Marine captain, a man with more courage than sense, charged him with a hockey-infused cutlass. For justice. Naruto sighed. He blurred, appearing behind the captain. He chopped the man on the back of the neck with the side of his hand. The captain's eyes rolled back, and he crumpled to the deck, unconscious. The momentary defiance broke. The Marines, seeing their captain fall so effortlessly, dropped their weapons and began leaping into the sea, swimming for their lives towards the other ships. Naruto didn't watch them go. He pressed his palm against the deck of the ship. Rasengan. A standard, controlled Rasengan tore through the deck, through the lower levels, and ripped a hole in the hull below the waterline. The ship groaned, beginning to list as water poured in. He didn't stop there. He drew on the massive reserves of chakra Kurama provided, his body glowing with a brilliant orange light. He entered his nine tails chakra mode. Golden energy erupted around him, forming into a massive, spectral fox head. Finally, Kurama's voice boomed, not just in Naruto's mind, but seemingly in the air around him. Let's show these insects what real power looks like. Giant, golden arms of pure chakra erupted from Naruto's back. They were colossal, easily dwarfing the battleships. One arm shot out and wrapped around the mast of another ship, and with a grunt of effort, Naruto tore it fro. The deck and hurled it like a javelin into the side of a third vessel. The remaining ships, their chain of command shattered, fell into chaos. Some tried to turn and flee. Others opened fire with a renewed, desperate ferocity. Cannonballs rained down, but they were swatted away by the colossal chakra arms like bothersome flies. From the shores of Amazon Lily, a new sound joined the fray. A high-pitched volley of whistles as thousands of hockey-infused arrows soared into the sky in a great black cloud. They rained down on the decks of the beleaguered fleet. Each arrow struck with the force of a bullet, punching through steel and flesh alike. Hancock and her sisters had joined the battle. She stood at the forefront, her beauty a terrifying beacon in the chaos. She created massive heart-shaped pistols with her fingers, firing, pistol kiss, projectiles that struck with pinpoint accuracy, turning any Marine with a flicker of impure thought to stone. Sandersonia and Marigold, fighting side by side, were a whirlwind of destruction. Their hockey-laced attacks clearing the decks of any soldier brave or foolish enough to stand their ground. It was no longer a battle. It was a perfectly executed pincer movement. Naruto was the hammer, smashing the fleet from the sea, and the Kuja were the anvil, raining down death from the shore. Naruto leapt from ship to ship, a golden comet of destruction. He didn't kill wantonly. He used overwhelming force to disable, disarm, and dismantle. He tore cannons from their mountings, ripped rudders from their housings, and collapsed masts. He was a one-man army, systematically taking the fleet apart piece by piece with terrifying efficiency. On the last fully operational ship, a new figure emerged. It was Vice Admiral Onagumo. He had survived, having used his spider-like agility to leap from his exploding flagship at the last second. He was burned, bleeding from a dozen cuts, and his face was a mask of pure, fanatical rage. 6 of his 8 spider legs were broken, dangling uselessly behind him. "Demon!" he shrieked, his voice raw. He drew 6 cutlasses at once, his 2 human arms and 4 of his remaining spider legs each gripping a blade. He coated them all in a thick, black layer of armament hockey. "I will deliver justice upon you myself." He shot forward, a whirlwind of spinning blades, his movements erratic and spider-like. Naruto met the charge head-on. He didn't even draw a weapon. He simply used his fists and feet, his body flowing with the golden energy of Kurama's chakra. He parried the hockey-coated blades with his forearms, the impacts creating explosive shockwaves. He moved with a grace and speed that made the Vice Admiral look clumsy. Clang, block, dodge, parry. It was a frantic dance of death. Onagumo was a seasoned Vice Admiral, a master of his devil fruit and hockey, a veteran of countless battles in the New World. And he was being utterly, hopelessly outclassed. Naruto wasn't just stronger or faster. He was smarter. He saw every attack before it was launched, his sage-enhanced senses combined with Kurama's raw power making him a precognitive nightmare to fight. "Your justice is a joke," Naruto said, his voice calm amidst the fury of their exchange. He saw an opening, a fractional overextension as Onagumo lunged with 3 swords at once. Naruto didn't counter with a punch or a kick. He formed a new Rasengan in his hand. But this one was different. It was small, no bigger than his thumb, and incredibly dense. He thrust his hand forward, not at Onagumo's body, but at the space between his attacking blades. The Rasengan detonated. The contained, explosive force didn't create a massive blast. It created a pinpoint concussive wave that shattered all 6 of Onagumo's cutlasses simultaneously. The Vice Admiral stared at the bladeless hilts in his hands, his eyes wide with disbelief. In that moment of shock, Naruto acted. A golden chakra arm shot out and slammed into Onagumo's chest, not with killing force, but with the impact of a freight train. The Vice Admiral was blasted off his feet, flying backwards across the deck of his ship, crashing through the far railing, and splashing into the sea below, defeated and humiliated. As a devil fruit user, the sea would do the rest. With their commander gone for good, the last vestiges of marine morale shattered. White flags began to appear on the remaining ships that were still afloat. The battle was over. The first wave of justice had been broken on the shores of Amazon Lily. Naruto stood on the deck of the captured ship, the golden aura of his chakra mode slowly receding. He looked out at the devastation. Wreckage and debris littered the calm belt. The proud marine fleet was a collection of sinking, burning hulks. A stray visual Den Mushi, knocked from its perch on one of the ships, was still active, its unblinking eye broadcasting the entire scene of carnage to a shocked and horrified world. He felt a presence land softly on the deck behind him. It was Hancock. She walked towards him, her usual arrogance replaced by a look of profound awe. She stopped beside him, looking out at the ruin he had wrought. "You," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "You truly are a monster." Naruto turned to her. He had expected fear, or maybe even disgust at the level of destruction. But he saw neither in her eyes. The word, monster, was not an accusation. It was a statement of fact, spoken with a reverence usually reserved for a god. He gave a small, weary smile. "I made a promise, didn't I?" She looked from the wreckage back to his face, her gaze lingering on his whisker-marked cheeks and his impossibly blue eyes. He had fulfilled his vow. He had stood between her and the world that had tormented her, and he had not bent. He had not broken. He had shattered the threat completely. The distance between them vanished. She stepped forward, rose onto her toes, and pressed her lips against his. It wasn't a kiss of passion, or lust, or even romance. It was a kiss of gratitude, of awe, a kiss that sealed a pact not of mating, but of alliance. A kiss that said, "You are my protector, and I am yours." The world could watch, the Marines could regroup, the celestial dragons could rage in their holy city. It didn't matter. In that moment, on the deck of a broken warship, surrounded by the spoils of their first victory, the Serpent Empress and the Sage of a forgotten world had forged a bond stronger than any steel, and declared their defiance to the heavens. In the hallowed halls of Mary Geoise, St. J. Garcia Saturn watched T. He lived feed from the stray Den Mushi on a massive screen. He watched the fleet get dismantled. He watched his vice admiral get swatted away like an insect. He watched the man cloaked in golden energy stand victorious. He felt no anger, no shock. He felt a cold, academic curiosity, mixed with the chilling certainty of a zealot who has just seen a demon. "So, this is our anomaly," he murmured, his voice deathly quiet. The other elders were silent, their faces grim masks. "A power that rivals the legends of old. It is not a weapon. It is a being." He had underestimated the threat. Rikanai. Sans force was an insult to this level of power. This, Naruto Uzumaki, was not just a regional problem. He was a philosophical threat. A being of godlike power who answered to no one, who did not recognize their divine authority. He was a heresy made flesh. Saturn's eyes narrowed. He fought with precision, overwhelming power, but strategically applied. He studies his opponents. Therefore, we must study him. He turned away from the screen, his mind already formulating a new, far more terrifying plan. Onagumo's report, though fatal, will be invaluable. We have footage. We have data on his abilities. This, clone technique, the energy constructs, the wind manipulation. He looked at the other elders, his voice resonating with cold, absolute authority. The S-type project on Egghead. The One Drive, Vegapunk has been developing based on Lunarian lineage factors. It is time for its first field test. "You mean, S-Cage?" one of them asked, a hint of unease in his voice. "It is untested. A prototype. Then we will test it," Saturn replied, his decision made. "This anomaly is the perfect subject. We will create a counter. A weapon specifically designed to hunt and neutralize this, Naruto. An angel to slay the demon." He walked towards his personal transponder snail, his long robe sweeping the floor. The first wave had failed. It was time to unleash a shadow. A shadow born of science and divinity. A silent hunter designed for a single purpose, to purge the blasphemous golden fox from their world. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. A Bounty and a Vow. The news of the decimation of Vic. Admiral Onagumo's fleet didn't just spread, it exploded. The footage from the stray Den Mushi, grainy and chaotic as it was copied and broadcast by news crews to every corner of the world. From the opulent halls of royal palaces to the grimiest back alley bars in the underworld, people watched in stunned disbelief. They saw a lone man, cloaked in golden fire, tear apart a dozen marine battleships. They saw a force of nature that defied all known categories of power. The world government's propaganda machine went into overdrive, painting the event as a cowardly, unprovoked pirate attack by the newly treacherous Kuja, led by a monstrous, unknown entity. But the footage told a different story. It showed an invasion force meeting an immovable object. The result was a single piece of paper that shook the foundations of the global power structure. A bounty poster. Wanted. Dead or alive. Kitsune. Naruto Uzumaki. 3,800,000,000 bots. The number was astronomical, instantly placing him in same legendary tier as the Four Emperors. It was a bounty born not just of threat assessment, but of sheer, unadulterated panic. It was the world government screaming to the world that this man was a cataclysmic danger. A force that had to be stopped at all costs. The poster featured a grainy screenshot from the Den Mushi feed. It was a picture of Naruto in his Nine Tails chakra mode, a chakra arm extended. The golden energy making him look like a vengeful sun god. His face was set in a grim line, his blue eyes blazing. Below the staggering number, the poster listed his alleged crimes: destruction of a marine fleet, conspiracy with the Kuja pirates, and the vaguely ominous charge of crimes against world order. On Amazon Lily, the poster was a source of both immense pride and profound anxiety. The younger Kuja warriors saw it as a badge of honor. Their protector, their Naruto-sama, was officially recognized as one of the most powerful beings in the world. They had repelled the world government and now stood shoulder to shoulder with a man worth nearly 4 billion berries. They felt invincible, but the older warriors, including Elder Nyan, understood the terrifying reality. This wasn't a prize, it was a target. Every ambitious pirate, every glory-seeking bounty hunter, every fanatical marine in the world would now be gunning for them. Amazon Lily was no longer a hidden sanctuary. It was the lair of one of the world's most wanted men. Naruto himself found the whole thing ridiculous. He was holding the poster in his hands, staring at the fierce, glowing visage that was supposed to be him. "Kitsune," he said, raising an eyebrow. "Fox. A little on the nose, don't you think?" He traced the number with his finger. "And what's this? B, with the lines through it. Berries. So my head is worth a lot of money." Quote, "It is more money than most nations see in a decade," Nyan said, her voice grim. She was sitting with him, Hancock, Sandersonia, and Marigold in the royal throne room. The mood was heavy. "This bounty is a declaration of war, Naruto. They are not just asking for your capture. They are inviting the entire world to come and tear this island apart to get to you." "Let them come," Marigold grunted, slamming a meaty fist on the arm of her chair. "We beat the Marines. We can beat anyone." "Don't be a fool, Marigold," Sandersonia chided, though her voice lacked its usual bite. "This is different. This invites chaos. The other emperors will take notice. Men like Kaido and Big Mom do not take kindly to new players on their board. And Blackbeard, that man is drawn to power like a moth to a flame." Quote, "She was right. On a frozen island in the New World, the titanic figure of Kaido, the king of the beasts, laughed a deep, rumbling laugh as he looked at the bounty poster. Sake sloshing from his gourd. A new challenger. It's been too long since I had a real fight. I hope he's as strong as they say." In her candy-coated kingdom of Toto Land, the colossal form of Big Mom, Charlotte Linlin, slammed the poster down on a table. Ma, nearly 4 billion. And he appeared from nowhere. What devil fruit does he have? I want it, and I want him for my collection of husbands. And on a dark, ramshackle island, the newly minted Emperor Marshal D. Teach, Blackbeard, held the poster, a wide, sinister grin splitting his face. "Ziahahaha. Look at this. A power to rival Whitebeard's. The world is getting more and more interesting. Yami and Gura, maybe it's time we added a kitsune to our hunt." The ripples were spreading. The world's predators were circling. Hancock had been silent throughout the discussion, her gaze fixed on Naruto. Her expression was a complex mixture of pride and fury. Pride that the man she had chosen, the man who had chosen her, was valued so highly. Fury that the world now dared to put a price on his head, to reduce him to a commodity. "There is another problem," she said finally, her voice cold and clear, drawing all eyes to her. "My title." Nyan sighed, knowing what was coming. "Hebihime. I am a warlord of the sea," Hancock continued, standing from her throne. She paced before them, her movements filled with a restless, angry energy. "A Shichibukai. My position grants this island a measure of protection, a treaty with the world government. It is the reason the Marines have left us alone for so long." She stopped and turned to face them, her eyes blazing. "But it also makes me a dog of the government. A tool they use to hunt other pirates." Her gaze fell on Naruto. "They have declared this man, my island's protector and my chosen partner, an enemy of the world. To maintain my title would be to tacitly agree with their declaration. It would mean that if they ordered me to capture him, I would be treaty-bound to obey." She scoffed, the sound sharp and contemptuous. "As if I would ever. The title has become a chain, a leash. It binds me to the very filth who once enslaved me, and now it demands I betray the one man who has offered me true protection." She walked to the center of the room, her presence filling the hall with an aura of absolute resolve. "I will not be their dog any longer." She raised her head, a queen making an irrevocable decree. "I, Boa Hancock, hereby renounce my title as a warlord of the sea. Let the world know that Amazon Lily stands with Naruto Uzumaki. His enemies are our enemies. His fight is our fight. From this day forward, the Kuja are not a warlord nation. We are an independent power, and he is our king." The silence in the room was absolute. Sandersonia and Marigold stared at their sister, their eyes wide with shock and dawning pride. Nyan looked horrified. "Hebihime, you cannot," the elder woman gasped. "To renounce the title is to declare open war. He treaty is the only thing keeping the full might of the admirals from our shores. We will be destroyed. We were almost destroyed a few days ago with the treaty," Hancock shot back, her voice unwavering. "The treaty is a lie. A convenience they ignore when it suits them. Our protection does not come from a piece of paper signed by our enemies. It comes from our strength. It comes from his strength." She gestured to Naruto. Naruto had been listening, his expression unreadable. He looked at Hancock, truly seeing the fire in her. This wasn't the arrogant, brittle empress he had first met. This was a leader, a decisive, powerful woman willing to gamble everything, her life, her title, her people's safety, on him. On the bond they had forged. The gesture was so profound, so deeply trusting, it struck him harder than any attack. He stood up, walking to stand beside her. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "You don't have to do this for me, Hancock," he said, his voice quiet and serious. She turned to face him, her dark eyes searching his. "I am not doing this for you, Naruto. I am doing this for us. There is no more. Me, and you. You made your choice when you faced that fleet. This is mine. I will not stand by a government that hunts the man I have chosen." She stumbled over the word, the concept of love still a foreign, dangerous territory, but the meaning was clear. Naruto looked into her eyes, and in their depths, he saw a mirror of his own resolve. He saw a partner. He had spent his life fighting alone, even when surrounded by friends. He was always the Jinchuriki, the child of prophecy, the one who had to bear the final burden. But here, now, was someone willing to stand in the storm with him, not behind him. A slow smile spread across his face. It was a genuine, warm smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. "All right," he said, "then I guess we're officially pirates now. I've always looked better in orange than in navy blue, anyway." The tension in the room broke. Marigold let out a booming laugh. Sandersonia smiled, a true, non-predatory smile for the first time. Even Nyan, though still terrified, couldn't help but feel a surge of pride at her empress's defiant stand. This was no longer just an alliance. It was a commitment, a shared destiny. That night, the celebrations were wild. The Kuja, fueled by their empress's declaration, saw the future not as a terrifying threat, but as a glorious new adventure. They feasted and danced around massive bonfires in the central plaza, celebrating their newfound freedom and their monstrously powerful new king. Naruto, however, wasn't in the mood for a party. The weight of Hancock's decision, of the bounty, of the coming storm, was heavy on his shoulders. He slipped away from the noise, seeking the quiet solitude of the cliffs where they had first seen the marine fleet. The sea was calm, the twin moons casting a silver path across the water. He sat at the edge of the cliff, letting the cool night air clear his head. "Running from your own coronation party?" a voice asked from behind him. He didn't have to turn. He recognized Hancock's presence. She came and sat beside him, her usual elaborate dress replaced by a simpler, more practical silken robe. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the distant sounds of the celebration and the gentle lapping of the waves below. "They're calling me a king," Naruto said finally, his voice thoughtful. "I spent my whole life chasing a title, Hokage, leader of my village. I thought it was what I wanted. But it was always about being acknowledged. About protecting everyone." He looked at her. "I don't want to be a king." "I know," Hancock said softly. "You do not seek power over others. You seek the power to protect them. It is why they follow you. It is why I follow you." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Hancock, what you did today, renouncing your title. That was a big deal. You put your entire island on the line for me." "I put my island on the line for its future," she corrected him gently. "A future with you in it is more secure than any false treaty with the world government." She paused, her gaze turning to the sea. When you fought that fleet, when I saw you standing there, a single man against an army, I wasn't afraid. Not for you, not for us. For the first time in my life, WHN faced with the power of the world government, I felt hope. You gave me that, Naruto. That is a gift more precious than any title. The original reason for his summoning felt like a lifetime ago. The crude, clinical proposal of mating to ensure the Kuja line. It had been an insult, a contract he had rejected out of hand. But now, sitting beside her under the moonlight, it felt different. Nyan summoned me here to be your husband, he said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. To be a father to the next generation. Hancock tensed slightly, but she didn't pull away. A foolish, desperate plan by a foolish, desperate old woman. Quote, maybe, Naruto conceded, but, maybe she wasn't entirely wrong. He turned to face her, his blue eyes serious and sincere. I don't have a way home, Hancock. Maybe there is no way home. My whole life has been about protecting my village, my friends. It was my purpose. He looked around, at the vast, dark jungle, the strange moons, the alien sea. I don't have that anymore. But when I was out there, fighting those ships, and I knew you and your sisters and all your people were behind me, depending on me, it felt right. It felt like I had a purpose again. He took a deep breath, laying his heart bare. I think I've found something in this strange world that I want to protect. A new precious place, a new family. He looked directly into her eyes. You, your sisters, your people. Quote, Hancock's breath hitched. Her heart, which she had guarded so fiercely for so long, hammered against her ribs. This wasn't a proposal based on a ritual or a duty. This was a confession, a choice, his choice. Naruto, she whispered, his name a prayer on her lips. I'm not going to force anything, he continued, his voice soft but firm. And I'm not asking you to fall in love with me. That's not how it works. But, I want to stay. I want to build a future here, with you. If you'll have me, not as a breeding stud, but as a partner. As family. Tears welled in Hancock's eyes. But they were not tears of sadness or fear. They were tears of overwhelming, world-altering relief. He understood. He truly, deeply understood. He wanted her, not just her body or her power, but her partnership. He wanted to build a life with her. She didn't answer with words. She leaned in, her hand coming up to gently cup his whisker-marked cheek. She closed the distance between them and kissed him. This time, it wasn't a kiss of gratitude or awe. It was a kiss of acceptance. A kiss of profound, earth-shattering emotion. It was hesitant at first, then deepened with a desperate intensity. A decade of frozen emotions thawing in a single, fiery moment. It was a kiss that held the promise of a shared future, of late-night talks and shared battles, of building a sanctuary in a world gone mad. It wasn't about a ritual anymore. It was about a vow. A vow made not in a throne room with a public declaration, but in the quiet of the night, between two scarred souls who found an unexpected home in each other. Far out in the chaotic waters of the new world, a ship with a morbid, punk rock aesthetic cut through the waves. Its captain, a tall, fiery red-haired man with a prosthetic metal arm and a perpetual sneer, slammed the new bounty poster down on a crate. Eustace, Captain Kidd, one of his crewmates said nervously. Are you sure about this? The calm belt is treacherous. And this, Kitsune, guy took out a fleet by himself. Kidd let out a sharp, metallic laugh. Exactly. That's why we're going. The world is in an uproar about this guy. He comes out of nowhere and gets a bounty bigger than mine. He humiliates the Marines. He makes an emperor's wife renounce her title. He gestured wildly with his metal arm, magnetic fields causing loose nails on the deck to float and spin. This isn't just some rookie. This is chaos. This is power. I want to see it for myself. I want to test his metal against mine. His grin was manic. Let's go pay a visit to the pirate empress and her new pet fox. Set a course for the calm belt. It's time to make some noise. His crew cheered, their captain's insane confidence infectious. The Kid pirates, notorious for their violence and their willingness to challenge anyone, were now on a collision course with Amazon Lily. Meanwhile, in a sterile, hyper-advanced laboratory on the futuristic island of Egghead, a single A lent figure stood in a containment cylinder. It had the lean, powerful build of a young man, with the distinct white hair, brown skin, and black wings of the near-extinct Lunarian race. Its face was a placid, emotionless mask, but its features were subtly modeled on the world's greatest swordsman, Dracula Mahawk. This was not just a pacifista. This was a seraphim. Dr. Vegapunk, his massive head looming over a console, made the final adjustments. Saint Saturn's orders had been absolute and had come with the complete combat data from Onagumo's fleet. Subject S. Cage, Vegapunk murmured to himself, his voice a distracted mumble. A fascinating challenge. The target, Kitsune, manipulates a unique energy source we're calling chakra. Standard energy absorption models are insufficient. It's not just energy, it has a physical and spiritual component. He typed a final string of code. Based on the data, the target's primary weakness is esoteric abilities that don't rely on conventional energy. Genjutsu, as described in the ancient texts recovered from Wano, would be ideal, but is impossible to replicate. However, we can program a countermeasure for his primary offensive techniques. He uploaded a new combat protocol into the Seraphim's core programming. It was based on Blackbeard's Yami Yami no Mi, the ability to create and control darkness. Not just any darkness, but a darkness that possessed a gravitational pull. A darkness that could nullify the powers of others. It was an imperfect, energy-intensive replication, but it might be enough. S. Cage, he announced to the silent figure in the tube. Your primary directive is the neutralization of the anomaly designated Kitsune. You are equipped with Lunarian durability, Kizaru's light speed movement patterns, and a localize. De-nullification field modeled on the Yami Yami no Mi. You will be deployed via a cloaked vessel. Infiltrate Amazon Lily. Locate the target. Engage and neutralize. Do not fail. The Seraphim's eyes snapped open. They were the cold, calculating golden eyes of a hawk, but they glowed with a faint, malevolent red light. A small wisp of black, shadowy energy coalesced around its hand before dissipating. The containment cylinder hissed open. The S. Cage took a single, silent step forward. The perfect hunter, a shadow of God, was now active. Its hunt was about to begin. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Shadow of God. The first sign that something was wrong was the silence. Not the familiar, unnerving stillness of the calm belt, but a new, predatory quiet that had fallen over the western jungles of Amazon Lily. The nocturnal insects, usually a deafening chorus, were mute. The strange, six-legged monkeys that swung through the canopy were gone. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Naruto felt it first. He was meditating atop the head of the giant stone hydra that guarded the entrance to the Kuja city, trying to deepen his connection to this world's wild, potent natural energy. For weeks, he had been mapping it, learning its ebbs and flows. But tonight, there was a hole in the tapestry. A void, a patch of jungle several miles wide that felt dead. The natural energy wasn't just absent, it was being consumed. Kurama's voice was a low, guttural growl in his mind. Something is out there, something that feels wrong. It's like a piece of the world has been carved out and replaced with nothing. Naruto's eyes snapped open, the orange pigment of sage mode already forming around them. His heightened senses reached out, casting a net of perception across the island. He found the void easily. It was moving, slowly but deliberately, towards the city. It wasn't trying to be stealthy in the traditional sense, it wasn't hiding its presence. It was simply moving in a way that defied normal detection. No sound, no scent, no heat, no chakra signature. It was a hole in reality walking through the jungle. He stood up, his expression grim. This wasn't a pirate or a marine. This was something else, something new. Hancock, he projected, not with his voice, but with a pulse of chakra, a trick he'd taught her so they could communicate across the island. Western perimeter. We have an intruder. Something's wrong. Stay in the city and get your warriors on high alert. I'm going to check it out. He received a flicker of acknowledgement and alarm back from her. Without another thought, he leapt from the hydra's head, a silent orange blur streaking towards the ominous silence in the jungle. He moved through the dense, alien foliage with a speed that would have left any other man a mangled wreck. To him, it was an open road. In sage mode, every vine, every root, every branch was perfectly mapped in his mind. He landed in a clearing at the edge of the silent zone, his feet making no sound on the damp earth. The transition was jarring. On one side of an invisible line, the jungle was alive with sound and energy. On the other, there was only a profound, suffocating emptiness. He took a step into the silence. The air was cold, heavy. He felt a strange, pulling sensation, as if the very energy in his body wanted to leak out into the oppressive emptiness around him. This was no devil fruit he'd ever heard of. This was something fundamentally different. He saw it then, standing in the middle of the clearing, partially obscured by the shadows of the giant jungle flora, was a figure. It was humanoid, with the distinct brown skin and white hair of the Lunarian race he'd learned about from Nyan's books, the race of gods that could create fire. But its wings were black, like a crow's, and its eyes glowed with a faint, crimson light. It wore a simple, black uniform, and its face was a mask of placid indifference. It looked like a teenager, but it felt ancient and utterly devoid of life. This was the S-Cage. It tilted its head, its glowing red eyes locking onto Naruto. There was no recognition, no emotion, only calculation. It was like being stared at by a machine. Ryu the one screwing with the energy around here? Naruto asked, his voice steady, though every instinct was screaming at him that this was the most dangerous thing he had yet faced in this world. Who sent you? The world government. The S-Cage didn't answer. It simply raised a hand, and a swirling vortex of what looked like black smoke or shadow coalesced in its palm. The pulling sensation intensified dramatically. Naruto felt the chakra in his sage mode cloak flicker, as if the darkness was a sponge, greedily trying to soak it up. Naruto's eyes widened. This was bad. Very bad. His entire fighting style was based on chakra. This thing, it ate chakra. Okay, Naruto said, his stance shifting from cautious to aggressive. No talking. I get it. He decided to test it. He formed a Rasengan in his hand. The familiar blue sphere of spiraling chakra a comforting weight. He shot forward, a blur of motion, and thrust the Rasengan at the Seraphim's chest. What happened next defied his understanding of physics. As the Rasengan got within a foot of the S-Cage, the vortex of darkness in its hand pulsed. The Rasengan didn't explode. It didn't connect. It unraveled. The spiraling chakra was pulled apart, sucked into the shadowy vortex and dissipated into nothingness. The attack was erased from existence before it could even land. Naruto leapt back, his mind racing, a jolt of genuine shock running through him. He'd had his jutsu absorbed before, by the likes of Pain and Madara. But this was different. This wasn't absorption. It was nullification, annihilation. The S-Cage took a step forward, its movements perfectly silent. A long, thin blade of pure, solidified darkness extended from its free hand. Then, it vanished. Naruto's sage-enhanced senses screamed a warning. He threw himself to the side. A purely reflexive action. A searing pain erupted from his shoulder as the shadow blade materialized where he had been standing a split second before, slicing through the sleeve of his jacket and cutting a deep gash in his arm. It hadn't just moved fast. It had moved at the speed of light, a technique he recognized with horror from Nyan's descriptions of Marine Admiral Kizaru. He landed in a crouch 50 feet away, clutching his shoulder. The wound wasn't just a cut. A strange cold was spreading from it, and the golden aura of his Nine Tails chakra mode, which had flared up instinctively to heal the wound, was being suppressed around the injury. It's not just absorbing chakra, Naruto. Kurama roared, a note of alarm in his voice. It's actively negating it, like sea stone, but for us. Naruto gritted his teeth, forcing Kurama's chakra to overwhelm the suppressive effect, the wound steaming as it slowly began to heal. This thing was a nightmare. It was a perfect counter. It could nullify his ninjutsu, move at the speed of light, and its attacks had an anti-chakra property. This wasn't a warrior. It was a scalpel, designed with a single purpose, to dissect him. You were made for me, weren't you? Naruto said, a grim understanding dawning on him. The world government hadn't just sent another brute. They had watched him fight. They had studied him, and they had built his executioner. The S-Cage showed no sign of having heard him. It simply vanished again. This time, Naruto was ready. He didn't rely on his eyes. He relied on his senses, on the feeling of that void moving through space. He felt the tear in reality appear behind him and spun, his leg sweeping out in a powerful kick aimed at where the seraphim would materialize. His kick connected, but it was like kicking a mountain of solid rubber. The S-Cage had brought up its arm to block, the Lunarian durability making its skin harder than steel. The impact created a sonic boom that flattened the surrounding trees. But the seraphim didn't even budge. It simply absorbed the kinetic energy. It countered with a punch, its fist wreathed in the same nullifying darkness. Naruto couldn't dodge in time. He crossed his arms to block, pouring Kurama's chakra into the defense. The punch landed, and it felt like being hit by a meteor. He was blasted backwards, sent skipping across the jungle floor like a stone on water, carving a massive trench through the earth and trees for nearly half a mile before he finally managed to halt his momentum. He staggered to his feet, coughing up a bit of blood. His arms were numb, the chakra in them disrupted and chaotic. This was not a fight he could win with raw power or standard ninjutsu. Every tool in his arsenal was being systematically countered. He needed to change the rules of the game. The S-Cage appeared at the far end of the trench he had carved, walking calmly toward him through the wreckage. It wasn't even breathing hard. Naruto took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. Panic was a death sentence. He was Naruto Uzumaki. He'd faced down gods and won. This was just a machine. A very, very smart machine, but a machine nonetheless. If ninjutsu was out, he'd use taijutsu. If raw power was being negated, he'd use speed and strategy. He entered Sage mode again, but this time, he didn't cloak himself in a brilliant aura. He kept the energy contained, using it purely for precognition and enhanced physicals. He needed to be a scalpel, not a sledgehammer. He created a dozen shadow clones. They didn't charge mindlessly. They spread out, flanking the S-Cage, each one armed with a kunai. They were a distraction, a way to test its combat programming. The seraphim didn't even seem to register them as a threat. As the clones converged, it simply spun, its shadow blade extending into a whip of pure darkness that cut through all 12 clones in a single, fluid motion. They all disappeared in puffs of smoke. It was brutally efficient, but it was the opening the real Naruto needed. While the S-Cage was focused on the clones, Naruto had shot forward, not at the seraphim, but past it. He grabbed a massive, uprooted tree trunk, one easily weighing several tons. And with a sage-powered roar, he spun and hurled it end over end at the S-Cage. It was a primitive, brutal attack. No chakra, just raw, physical force. The S-Cage turned, its red eyes registering the incoming projectile. It raised a hand, and the dark vortex appeared again. But a tree wasn't made of chakra. The vortex had no effect. The seraphim was forced to physically block it, catching the massive trunk with both hands. The impact drove it back several feet, its boots digging trenches in the ground. It was immensely strong, but it was not infinitely so. That was the key. Its nullification power was its greatest weapon, but it only worked on energy. Physical attacks, while blunted by its Lunarian durability, were still effective. The fight turned into a brutal, island-wide chase. Naruto became a guerrilla fighter in his own jungle. He used the terrain to his advantage, leading the S-Cage into rockfalls, luring it into pits filled with sharpened stakes, using his clones to create complex diversions while he set up massive, physical traps. It was a desperate, ugly, and punishing way to fight. He took hits, deep cuts from the shadow blade and bone-jarring punches that left him bruised and bleeding. But he gave as good as he got, slowly but surely wearing down the seraphim's defenses. The S-Cage was a perfect hunter, but it was a machine. It couldn't adapt in the way a living being could. It was programmed to counter a chakra-wielding god. It wasn't programmed to deal with an endlessly creative, stubborn ninja using the entire island as his weapon. The chase led them, inevitably, back towards the city. Naruto was tiring. His chakra reserves were vast, but the constant need to heal from the nullification wounds was a serious drain. He needed to end this, and he couldn't do it alone. As they burst into the massive Kuja arena, the battleground of his arrival, he sent out another pulse of chakra. Hancock. Now, the S-Cage stopped in the center of the arena, its red eyes scanning the empty stands. It registered Naruto, who was breathing heavily on the far side. It had cornered its prey. Then, from the archways around the arena, they appeared. Not the entire Kuja army. Just two. Boa Sandersonia and Boa Marigold. So this is the thing that's been giving you trouble, Naruto. Marigold grunted, cracking her knuckles. Doesn't look like much. Its looks are deceiving, sister. Sandersonia hissed, her hair already beginning to writhe like living snakes. Feel that. It's like a black hole. The S-Cage's head swiveled, its internal sensors identifying the two new arrivals. It registered their biosignatures, cross-referencing them with its internal database. Boa Sandersonia, Boa Marigold, known associates of the target. Devil Fruit users. It recalibrated its threat assessment. Distract it, Naruto yelled, already forming a plan. Don't let it touch you. Its darkness power negates devil fruits too. The sisters didn't need to be told twice. They had seen what this thing had done to Naruto. They attacked in perfect sync. Marigold inhaled deeply and spat a massive gout of fire, her devil fruit allowing her to generate intense flames. Saw. Sandersonia sent her hair snakes shooting forward, not to strike, but to herd the S-Cage into the path of the fire. The seraphim reacted instantly. It vanished in a flash of light, appearing 20 feet to the left, easily dodging the fire. But the sisters were ready. Marigold redirected her flame breath, while Sandersonia's hair snakes changed direction midair, creating a pincer of fire and scales. The S-Cage was forced to go on the defensive. It spun, its shadow blade deflecting the snake heads while its other hand formed a shield of darkness to absorb the flames. It was being pressed. Its programming was optimized for a single, energy-based target. Multiple opponents using coordinated, varied attacks were forcing it to rapidly cycle through its defensive protocols. This was the opening Naruto had been waiting for. This was his one, desperate gamble. He entered his full Nine Tails chakra mode, a brilliant sun of golden energy in the dark arena. The S-Cage's head snapped towards him, IT's primary target protocol overriding all else. It ignored the sisters, its singular purpose reasserting itself. It saw the massive buildup of chakra and identified it as the ultimate threat. It shot towards him, its hand outstretched. The vortex of absolute darkness swirling in its palm, ready to nullify whatever colossal attack was coming. Naruto didn't create a Rasenshuriken. He didn't form a tailed beast bomb. He stood his ground. Now, he roared. The S-Cage was a foot away, its nullification hand about to make contact. Suddenly, dozens of prehensile, green hair snakes erupted from the ground around its feet, wrapping around its ankles and legs, locking it in place. It was Sandersonia's Hebigami Tsuki. The seraphim's strength was immense, and it began to tear through the hair, but it was held for a crucial second. In that second, Naruto didn't attack. He let it stab him. The S-Cage, its programming identifying the ultimate opening, thrust its other hand forward. The black, shadowy blade materialized and plunged deep into Naruto's abdomen. Pain, cold and absolute, exploded through Naruto's body. The nullification effect spread like ice through his veins, fighting against Kurama's healing factor. The golden chakra cloak sputtered and died around the wound. The seraphim had impaled him, anchoring itself to him. Just as he planned. Got you, Naruto grunted, a bloody grin spreading across his face. The S-Cage's emotionless eyes seemed to widen in something akin to confusion. Its programming registered a critical error. The target had intentionally taken a fatal blow. It did not compute. Naruto's hands shot out and clamped down on the seraphim's arm, his grip like steel. You can nullify my chakra from a distance, he gritted out, blood trickling from his lips. But let's see what happens when it's point blank. He didn't try to form a complex jutsu. He simply opened the floodgates. He and Kurama unleashed a torrent of raw, untamed chakra, not as an attack, but as a pure, uncontrolled detonation. It wasn't ninjutsu. It was a suicide bomb of pure energy. A colossal, golden dome of tailed beast chakra erupted from Naruto's body. The S-Cage was at ground zero. Its nullification field, designed to absorb and dissipate structured techniques, was instantly overwhelmed by the sheer, chaotic volume of raw power. It was like trying to stop a tsunami with a teacup. The darkness was consumed by the light. The seraphim's body, for the first time, showed visible damage. Cracks spread across its lunarian skin. Its wings were shredded. The crimson light in its eyes flickered and died. But it wasn't enough. Its durability was monstrous. It was still standing, still impaled on its own blade in Naruto's gut. Naruto roared, a sound of pure, agonized defiance. He focused all the remaining energy not into a sphere, but into his mouth. He was going to do it right here, right now. A point-blank tailed beast bomb. It would destroy the Seraphim. It would also destroy him and a good chunk of the city. Suddenly, a wave of pink energy washed over the scene. It wasn't aimed at him. It was aimed at the S-Cage. Hancock stood at the entrance to the arena, her hands formed into her mellow pose. "Do not lay a hand on my husband," she screamed, her voice filled with desperate fury. The beam struck the damaged Seraphim, and for the first time, its emotionless facade broke. Its programming, designed by Vegapunk, had a core directive above all others: self-preservation to ensure data recovery. The catastrophic damage from Naruto's chakra bomb, combined with the unknown energy from Hancock's attack, triggered an unexpected emotional response modeled from its genetic template. It felt a flicker of something. Annoyance. No. Pride. No. It was lust, a ghost of Mihawk's legendary arrogance, twisted by Hancock's power into a perverse admiration for her beauty and power. It was only a fraction of a second, but it was enough. The S-Cage's body stiffened. A thin layer of stone began to form on its arm. It wasn't a full petrification. The Seraphim's inherent resistance was too strong, but its movements became sluggish, its body partially seized. It was the opening Naruto needed. He didn't need to fire the tailed beast bomb. He poured the last of his energy into a single, massive Rasengan, formed by a giant chakra arm. He rammed it into the chest of the partially petrified, still impaled Seraphim. Massive Rasengan. The result was absolute. The Rasengan hit the critically damaged, partially stoned body and didn't just explode. It ground the S-Cage into dust. The combination of physical force, explosive chakra, and the compromised structure of its body was too much. The perfect hunter, the shadow of God, was erased in a brilliant flash of blue and gold light. The arena fell silent. Naruto collapsed to his knees, the S-Cage's shadow blade dissipating into nothing as its user was destroyed. The gaping wound in his stomach began to steam, Kurama's chakra, now unopposed, flooding the injury and knitting it back together at a visible rate. Sandersonia and Marigold rushed to his side, supporting him. Hancock ran to him, her face a mask of terror and relief. She dropped to her knees in front of him, her hands hovering over his wound, afraid to touch. "You idiot," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "You reckless, insane, wonderful idiot. You could have been killed." Naruto looked up at her, his vision swimming. He gave a weak, tired grin. "Yeah, but I wasn't. See, it all worked out." He looked at the spot where the S-Cage had been, at the fine gray dust settling on the arena floor. He had won, but the cost had been high, and the implications were terrifying. They hadn't just sent an army. They had sent an answer. They were learning, adapting, and this was only the prototype. What would the next one be like? In Mary Geoy's, a single red light on a massive monitor blinked out. Subject S-Cage. Offline. Vital signs. Terminated. Saint J. Garcia Saturn stared at the screen. He had watched the entire battle via the Seraphim's optical feed. He had seen its initial success, its tactical superiority, and its ultimate failure. "Incredible," he whispered, a slow, cold smile spreading across his face. "It failed. But the data, oh, the data is magnificent." The S-Cage had uploaded its entire combat log up to the moment of its destruction. They now had data on the target's Sage mode, his clone tactics, his physical strength, his endurance, the upper limits of his chakra output, and even the emotional vulnerability of his allies. The prototype had been a resounding success. It had been a sacrifice, but a worthy one. It had gathered all the information they needed to build the true weapon. He turned to his communications officer. "Get me Admiral Ryokugyu. Tell him the preliminary test is complete. It is time to formalize the Divine Purification Task Force. Grant him full command and access to the entire next generation of Seraphim. His hunt begins now." The game of cat and mouse was over. It was time for the wolves to be unleashed. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Fox and Serpent's Domain. The dust from the S-Cage's destruction settled, but the unease it left behind was a permanent stain on the psyche of Amazon Lily. Naruto healed quickly, Kurama's immense chakra knitting together the grievous wound in a matter of hours. But the psychological scars remained. He had won, but it had been a brutal, desperate victory against a single, faceless opponent. The fight had exposed a terrifying truth. Their enemy wasn't just powerful, they were intelligent, patient, and terrifyingly resourceful. A war council was held in the Kuja throne room, but the mood was not one of victory. It was somber, heavy with the weight of a future that seemed to be shrinking around them. They built a monster specifically to kill you, Hancock stated, her voice tight with a cold fury that had yet to dissipate since the battle. She had barely left Naruto's side, her protective instincts now honed to a razor's edge. This was a test, a data-gathering mission. The next one will be stronger. Or there will be more of them. She's right, Naruto agreed. Leaning forward in his chair, he felt a phantom ache in his abdomen where the shadow blade had impaled him. We can't just sit here and wait for them to build a better Naruto killer. A defensive strategy is a slow death. We repel one wave, they study us, they send a better one. We can't win that way. Then what do we do? Sandersonia asked, her usual snide confidence replaced by genuine concern. We cannot take the fight to Mary Geoise. That is suicide. No, Naruto said, his eyes distant as a grand, audacious strategy began to form in his mind. We don't attack their heartland. We attack their authority. We don't just be pirates, we become a power. A power like the other emperors. We carve out our own territory, a place so strong, so stable, that attacking us becomes too costly for them. We don't just build a fortress, we build a nation. Elder Nyan, who had been listening silently, shook her head. A nation, boy, we are one island of women in the calm belt. The emperors control dozens of islands, vast fleets, entire armies of allies. So we get some, Naruto replied, a spark of his old, unshakable determination returning to his eyes. Look around us. This part of the Grand Line, the entrance to the New World, is chaotic. It's full of islands oppressed by petty tyrants, rogue pirates, and even the world government itself. We don't just conquer them. We liberate them. He stood up, pacing the room, the energy of his idea filling the space. We go to these places. We crush the oppressors, and we offer the people a choice. Join us. Become a protectorate of Amazon Lily. In return for their loyalty and resources, they get our protection. The protection of the Kuja warriors. The protection of the Gorgon sisters. He paused, his gaze sweeping over all of them. And my protection. It was a breathtakingly bold plan. To not just be a pirate crew, but to become a geopolitical force. A fourth pole of power in a world dominated by the Marines and the Emperors. Our first target, Naruto continued, pointing to a large map of the surrounding sea that Nyan had unrolled, is right here. The Gardoa Archipelago. It's a chain of 3 islands just outside the calm belt. Rich in food, lumber, and, according to your scouts, a deep water port. It's strategically perfect, but it's ruled by a man named Baron Omatsu, a tyrant who has an alliance with the underworld and bleeds his people dry. Omatsu is a beast, Marigold grunted. He has a small army of mercenaries and an iron grip on those islands. The Marines leave him alone because he pays a hefty tribute to a celestial dragon. Perfect, Naruto said with a grim smile. We'll be sending a message to the underworld and the gods at the same time. Hancock watched him, her heart swelling with a fierce pride. This was the man she had chosen. Not just a warrior, but a leader. A visionary. He didn't think in terms of battles. He thought in terms of legacy. He wasn't just planning to survive, he was planning to build a kingdom for them. The Kuja have not waged a war of conquest in 500 years, she said, her voice ringing with authority as she rose from her throne. That changes today. Prepare the Yuta. Gather our 50 strongest warriors. We sail at dawn. She looked at Naruto, a queen addressing her king. Baron Omatsu is about to learn what happens when you build your castle in the territory of a fox and a serpent. Quote, 3 days later, the Kuja's massive, serpent-drawn ship, the Yuta, emerged from the mists of the calm belt into the turbulent waters of the Grand Line. At its prow stood Naruto, Hancock, her sisters, and 50 of the most elite Kuja warriors, their hockey-laced arrows ready. The Gardoa Archipelago was a grim sight. The main island, Gardoa Prime, was dominated by a hideous, iron-plated fortress that squatted on the landscape like a monstrous tick. The town surrounding it was dilapidated, the people gaunt and fearful. Black smoke chugged from factories that polluted the sky, and the once lush forests had been clear-cut into a barren wasteland. "This is worse than I thought," Naruto muttered, his sage senses feeling the palpable misery that blanketed the island like a shroud. "Omatsu values profit above all else," Hancock said, her voice dripping with disgust. "He works his people to the bone in his weapons factories, selling arms to pirates and warring nations." Their arrival did not go unnoticed. Alarms blared from the fortress. A small fleet of shoddy-looking mercenary ships moved to intercept them, firing cannons with more noise than accuracy. Hancock scoffed. "Amateurs. She didn't even need Naruto's help." The Kuja warriors responded with a single, perfectly coordinated volley. 50 hockey-infused arrows flew across the water. They didn't just hit the ships. They hit their targets with surgical precision. One volley struck the rudder chains. Another shredded the sails. A third struck the cannon barrels, causing them to explode. In less than a minute, the entire defensive fleet was crippled, left dead in the water without a single life lost. It was a demonstration of terrifying skill. The Yuta docked at the main port. The town was deserted, the people having fled into their homes, peering out from behind boarded-up windows. A small army of about 200 mercenaries had formed a defensive line in front of the fortress gates. A motley collection of thugs armed with rifles and swords. At their head was Baron Omatsu himself, a grotesquely fat man in a ridiculously opulent suit, his face purple with rage. "Boa Hancock," he bellowed, his voice amplified by a den mushi. "You have no authority here. I am under the protection of St. Charlos. To attack me is to attack a world noble." Hancock laughed, a sound of pure, melodic contempt. "That name means less than nothing to me, you fat pig. You are a blight on the sea, and we have come to remove you." Omatsu sneered. "You and what army? You have 50 women. I have 200 hardened killers." He then looked past her and saw Naruto, standing calmly with his hands in his pockets. "And who is this? The famous Kitsune, the 4 billion berry man. I don't care who you are. My bounty hunters will be ecstatic. Kill them all. Bring me his head." The mercenaries let out a battle cry and charged. Naruto sighed. He really shouldn't have said that. He didn't move. Hancock, Sandersonia, and Marigold stepped forward. This was their message to send. The Gorgon sisters versus an army. It wasn't a battle. It was a reaping. Marigold became a wall of fire and fury. Our massive form wading into the mercenary ranks, her hockey-coated fists sending men flying like bowling pins. Sandersonia was a blur of green, her hair snakes disarming and incapacitating dozens of men at once, her movements a beautiful, deadly dance. Hancock was the most terrifying of all. She simply walked forward, and men fell before her. Some were petrified by her pistol kiss. Others, overwhelmed by her conqueror's hockey, simply collapsed, foaming at the mouth. She was a goddess of war, untouchable and absolute. In less than 5 minutes, the entire mercenary army was defeated. The ground was littered with unconscious or petrified bodies. Not a single Kuja warrior had even needed to draw her bow. Baron Omatsu stared, his jaw slack, his face drained of all color. He stumbled backward, turning to flee into his fortress. "Close the gates! Close the gates!" he screamed in terror. The massive, iron-plated gates began to grind shut. They were halfway closed when a flash of orange appeared before them. It was Naruto. He simply placed his palms on the 2 massive iron doors. He took a breath, and a golden aura flared around him. Then he pushed. The sound was a deep, groaning shriek of tortured metal. The multi-ton iron gates, designed to withstand a cannon barrage, bent outwards. The hinges tore from the stone walls with explosive force. Naruto straightened up, casually tossing the TWO mangled fortress gates aside as if they were made of cardboard. He walked through the newly created opening and looked at the stunned, terrified Omatsu. "You wanted my head?" Naruto asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Come and get it." Omatsu let out a pathetic whimper, his bravado utterly shattered. He collapsed into a blubbering heap, begging for his life. The liberation of the Gardoa archipelago was swift and total. With Omatsu and his lieutenants captured, the people slowly, hesitantly emerged from their homes. Naruto and Hancock didn't make speeches or grand proclamations. Their actions spoke for them. The Kuja warriors, efficient and organized, began distributing food from their ship's stores. Naruto, using his shadow clones, began the arduous process of repairing the town's infrastructure, fixing wells, and reinforcing damaged buildings in a single afternoon. That evening, in the main plaza, Hancock stood before the gathered people of Gardoa. Omatsu and his cronies were bound in sea-stone chains behind her. "People of Gardoa," she announced, her voice ringing with power. "Your tyrant is gone. Your freedom is returned to you. We offer you a choice. You can remain independent, and we will leave. Or, you can swear fealty to the Kuja tribe and our king, Naruto Uzumaki." She gestured to Naruto, who stood beside her. "Swear your loyalty to us, and this island will become our protectorate. You will contribute a share of your resources to our nation, and in return, you will have our absolute protection. No pirate, no marine, not even the world government will dare to harm you again. We will help you rebuild. We will ensure you are fed. We will give you a future. The choice is yours." An old man, the town's former elder before Omatsu's reign, stepped forward. His face was etched with years of suffering, but his eyes were clear. He looked at the bound form of Omatsu, at the disciplined Kuja warriors, and at the sun-haired man who could tear down fortress walls with his bare hands, yet spent his afternoon fixing a child's roof. He dropped to one knee. "We choose you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We choose freedom. We choose protection. We swear fealty to the Serpent Empress and the Fox King." Quote, one by one, the entire town knelt. It was a wave of hope, a mass surrender to a new and better future. Naruto looked out at the sea of kneeling people and felt a profound sense of rightness. This was it. This was the foundation of their nation. Not a kingdom built on fear, but an empire forged from liberation. Amazon Lily was their fortress. Gardoa was their first bastion. They had declared themselves a new power, and the world had no choice but to listen. The news of Gardoa's liberation and subsequent allegiance to the Kitsune Kuja alliance sent fresh shockwaves through the world. It was one thing to repel a marine attack. It was another entirely to begin actively claiming territory. This was a move straight from the playbook of the Four Emperors. The world now had a new, unofficial Yonko, and this move earned them a visitor. A few days later, as Naruto was overseeing the initial rebuilding efforts on Gardoa, a single, unassuming ship sailed into the newly repaired harbor. It flew no flag, but its presence was immense. A lone figure disembarked and walked onto the pier. He was a powerfully built man with graying hair, a distinctive red tattoo over his left eye, and an aura of such profound calm and control that it made the very air seem to stand still. He carried a rifle slung over his shoulder, but it was clearly an accessory. His true weapon was his presence. The Kuja warriors guarding the port instantly drew their bows, their haki flaring. Hancock and Naruto, sensing the arrival of a major power, were there in moments. "That's far enough," Hancock commanded, her voice cold. "Identify yourself." The man stopped, a faint, wry smile on his lips. He looked past Hancock, his gaze settling on Naruto. It was a look of pure, professional assessment. A master warrior sizing up another. "My name is Ben Beckman," he said, his voice a calm, deep baritone. "I'm the first mate of the red-haired pirates. My captain sent me." The name dropped like a bomb. The red-haired pirates. The crew of one of the Four Emperors, red-haired, Shanks. The most balanced and enigmatic of the Yonko crews. "Shanks," Naruto said, his curiosity piqued. He knew the name. The man who had given the straw hat to a young boy named Luffy, the brother of Portgas D. Ace, a man whose story he had learned from Nyan. "He's taken an interest in you," Beckman said, his gaze unwavering. "Anyone who shakes up the world this much gets his attention. He's not here to start a fight. He's here to talk, or rather, he sent me to talk, and to share a drink." He held up a large, ornate bottle of sake. Naruto exchanged a look with Hancock. Her expression was wary, suspicious. The emperors were rivals, predators. An overture like this was unheard of. But Naruto sensed no malice from the man. Only a deep, abiding strength and a straightforward purpose. "All right," Naruto said, making a decision. "Let's talk." They sat on a pile of lumber at the edge of the pier. away from the prying ears of the townsfolk. Hancock stood a short distance away, her arms crossed, a silent, watchful guardian. Beckman uncorked the sake and poured 2 cups. He passed one to Naruto. "My captain likes men who make their own way," Beckman began, taking a sip of his sake. "He values freedom above all else. He sees what you're doing here. You're not just plundering, you're building, you're challenging the world government's definition of order. He respects that." "What does he want?" Naruto asked, getting straight to the point. "Nothing," Beckman replied honestly. "And everything. He doesn't want an alliance. Not yet. He doesn't want territory. He wants to know who you are. Where you stand. The world is a finely balanced scale, Kitsune. You've just thrown a 4 billion berry weight onto one side. He wants to know if you're going to tip it towards freedom, or just another kind of tyranny." Naruto took a long drink of the sake. It was strong, rich, and burned a pleasant trail down his throat. "I'm not interested in tyranny," he said, setting the cup down. "I'm not interested in conquering the world. I'm building a sanctuary, a place where the people I care about can live free, without having to bow to pirates, or marines, or self-proclaimed gods in a holy city." Beckman studied him for a long moment, then a genuine smile touched his lips. "He'll like that answer." He took another drink. "Be warned. Your actions have not gone unnoticed by the others. Kaido wants to fight you. Big Mom wants to own you. Blackbeard wants to consume you. You've painted a massive target on your back." "I've had a target on my back since the day I was born," Naruto said with a shrug. "I'm used to it." "Fair enough," Beckman said. He finished his sake and stood up. "That's all I came for. A line of communication is now open between us. My captain doesn't like to fight pointless wars. If our goals align, we'll stay out of each other's way. If they conflict," he let the sentence hang in the air. A respectful but clear warning. He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. A piece of friendly advice. The world government is not like a pirate crew. They don't forgive, and they don't forget. You didn't just bloody their nose. You challenged their very existence. They will not send another fleet. They will not send another assassin. They will send a monster. An admiral." With that cryptic warning, he walked back to his ship, got on board, and sailed away as quietly as he had arrived. The meeting left Naruto with a deep sense of unease. An admiral, the world government's ultimate weapons. He had faced down their perfect assassin. What would one of their top-tier generals be like? The answer came sooner than he expected. A few days later, a scout from Gardoa's newly established watchtower came with a dire report. A massive marine fleet had been spotted on the horizon. But it wasn't approaching. It was forming a line, a blockade, sealing off Gardoa archipelago from the rest of the Grand Line. Naruto and Hancock stood on the cliffs of Gardoa, watching through a telescope. It was a fleet of at least 30 ships, far larger than Onagumo's. At its center was a flagship unlike any other, adorned with plants and flowers, as if a forest was growing on its deck. Standing on the prow of that ship was a man they could see even from this distance. A tall, muscular man with long, dark hair, wearing a marine coat draped over his shoulders. He was just standing there, his arms crossed, a lazy, arrogant smile on his face. Even from miles away, Naruto could feel his power. It was like the Cage's soulless void and Onagumo's fanatical rage combined and magnified 1,000 times. It was an energy that felt deeply connected to the natural world, but in a twisted, parasitic way. This man didn't borrow from nature. He commanded it. He consumed it. "An admiral," Hancock whispered, the name a curse on her lips. "Ryokugyu," Naruto said, the name coming to him from Nyan's lessons. "Green Bull," the admiral who could supposedly go years without eating. A Den Den Mushi on the watchtower crackled to life, broadcasting a message on an open channel. Ryokugyu's voice, lazy and confident, boomed across the archipelago. "Attention, citizens of Gardoa and the pirates illegally occupying it," he drawled. "My name is Admiral Aramaki, but you can call me Ryokugyu. By the authority of the world government, this archipelago is now under official quarantine. No ship enters. No ship leaves. Any vessel attempting to breach this blockade will be instantly destroyed. This is not a negotiation. This is a culling. We are simply going to wait until you all starve to death." He let out a lazy chuckle. Enjoy your new kingdom, Kitsune. I hope it was worth it. The line went dead. Naruto lowered the telescope, his face a grim mask. This was the monster Beckman had warned him about. Not a mindless brute, but a cruel, strategic predator. He wasn't laying siege to their fortress. He was laying siege to their ideals. He was going to starve the very people they had just sworn to protect, to turn them against their new saviors. It was a move of profound, tactical cruelty. The first battle had been a physical test. The second had been a strategic one. This was a moral one. The Divine Purification Task Force had arrived, and its commander had just made his opening move. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Calm Before the Divine Storm. The blockade was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive warfare. Admiral Ryokugyu's fleet of 30 ships formed an impenetrable iron circle around the Gardoa archipelago, their cannons silent but their presence a suffocating promise of violence. He made no move to attack. He simply waited. It was a siege of attrition, a slow, creeping death sentence designed not just to kill, but to break the spirit. In the first week, defiance was high. The people of Gardoa, fresh from their liberation, trusted their new protectors. Naruto, using his shadow clones and the Kuja's expertise, organized the island's resources with military precision. Food was rationed. Water was conserved. He taught the local fishermen new, more efficient techniques to harvest the island's immediate coastal waters, but it wasn't enough. Gardoa was a trading hub. It was not self-sufficient. Its granaries were finite. By the second week, the mood had begun to sour. The rations grew smaller. The faces of the children grew thinner. The initial fervor of liberation was replaced by the gnawing, primal fear of starvation. Whispers started in the dark corners of the town. Was this freedom worth an empty belly? The Baron was a tyrant, but at least there was bread. Naruto felt the shift in the island's morale like a physical weight. He walked the streets of the main town every day, not as a king, but as a worker. He helped repair nets, reinforce homes, and play with the children, trying to project an aura of unshakable confidence he didn't entirely feel. He could win a fight against an army. He could defeat a purpose-built assassin. But how did he fight an idea? How did he defeat hunger? This is a cruel, brilliant strategy, he said one evening, standing with Hancock on the cliffs overlooking the silent, imposing fleet. The setting sun painted the marine ships in bloody shades of orange and red. He's not attacking us. He's making us attack ourselves. He's turning our greatest strength, the loyalty of our people, into our greatest weakness. Hancock's face was a mask of cold fury. We could break the blockade. You and I, my sisters, we have the power to sink his fleet. And what then? Naruto countered, his voice heavy. He's an admiral. He's not Onagumo. He's on a different level. A direct fight would be devastating. Even if we won, the cost would be immense. And what's to stop the world government from sending another admiral? Or two? We can't fight their entire military machine head-on. We need to be smarter. He was caught in a trap of his own making. His vow to protect these people meant he couldn't abandon them. But staying meant watching them slowly starve. His power, so absolute in combat, felt frustratingly useless against a problem that couldn't be solved with a Rasengan. It was during this period of tense, grinding quiet that the Kuja's true strength came to the forefront. This was not their first hardship. They were a tribe of survivors. Under Sandersonia's guidance, they ventured deep into Gardoa's blighted forests, using their skills as huntresses to find edible roots and herbs the locals had long forgotten. Marigold, with her brute strength, led teams to dig new wells, finding fresh water sources deep underground. They were not just warriors, they were builders, leaders, and providers. They worked alongside the people of Gardoa, their quiet competence and unwavering resolve a bulwark against the rising tide of despair. And Naruto found a new purpose. He couldn't create food from nothing, but he could create hope. He began training the able-bodied men and women of Gardoa, not to be warriors, but to be defenders. He taught them basic hand-to-hand combat, strategy, and teamwork. He showed them how to use their farming tools as makeshift weapons, how to work together to protect their homes. He was giving them a sense of agency, a way to fight back that wasn't dependent on him. He was transforming a populace of victims into a militia of proud citizens. His relationship with Hancock and her sisters deepened into something truly familial. The pretense was gone, replaced by easy intimacy of people facing a crisis together. They would eat their meager rations together, plan strategy late into the night, and find moments of quiet solace in each other's company. One evening, Naruto sat with Sandersonia, not as a king, but as a fellow shinobi, and they spent hours discussing the nature of their abilities. He explained the principles of sage mode, and she, in turn, expressed the intricacies of her devil fruit, how she could feel through her hair snakes, how they were an extension of her own nervous system. It was a meeting of minds that transcended their different worlds. He and Hancock were the anchor. In public, they were the unshakable king and queen. In private, they allowed their masks to drop. I feel like I'm failing them, he admitted one night, as they sat in their shared quarters in the commandeered fortress. No, she said, her hand finding his. Her touch was no longer hesitant. It was a firm, grounding presence. You were teaching them to stand. You were giving them the will to endure. There is more to being a leader than winning battles, Naruto. I am learning that from you. Their bond was no longer a romance born of crisis. It was a partnership, deep and profound. They were two halves of a whole, his boundless empathy and strategic creativity perfectly complementing her regal authority and unyielding strength. The mating proposal was a laughable, distant memory. This was a marriage, forged not by ritual, but by fire. It was into this tense, grinding stalemate that a new player arrived. He came like a ghost. The blockade, impenetrable to ships, was no obstacle for him. He simply walked into the harbor, his feet touching the water but not sinking, a feat of impossible agility. He was a tall, imposing man wrapped in a dark green cloak, his face hidden in shadows. But the left side of his jaw was covered in a strange, geometric red tattoo. A palpable aura of cold, revolutionary fury radiated from him, a pressure that was the ideological opposite of Ryokugyu's arrogant authority. Naruto and Hancock confronted him on the pier, the island's new militia forming a nervous circle around them. That's far enough, Naruto said, his stance relaxed but ready. He could feel the power in this man. It was immense, but wild and untamed, like a raging storm. The man stopped, his shadowed gaze sweeping over the scene, the thin but determined faces of the Gardone militia. The proud Kuja warriors standing ready, and finally, Naruto and Hancock. You are Naruto Uzumaki, the man said, his voice a deep, gravelly rumble. It was a statement, not a question. The world is buzzing with your name. I came to see the truth of it for myself. You have an advantage on me, then, Naruto replied coolly. The man pulled back his hood. His face was severe, his eyes holding the fierce, unwavering intensity of a zealot. It was a face Naruto had seen on a bounty poster in Nyan's collection. My name is Monkey D. Dragon, he said. The name sent a ripple of shock through the assembled Kuja. Dragon, the leader of the revolutionary army. The world government's most wanted man. A figure of myth and terror, the only person who actively waged a global war against the celestial dragons. The revolutionary, Hancock breathed, her hand instinctively going to the hilt of a hidden blade. I am no enemy of yours, Boa Hancock, Dragon said, his gaze shifting to her. Any enemy of the world government is a potential friend of mine. His eyes then locked back onto Naruto. I have seen what you can do. You have the power to topple nations, to challenge the gods themselves. But you waste it, defending one small archipelago. I'm not wasting anything, Naruto said, his voice hardening at the man's dismissive tone. I'm protecting my people. They are not your people. Dragon countered, his voice laced with a cold logic. They are a stepping stone. Your power is a key, a weapon that could liberate the entire world. The suffering on this ISL, and is a microcosm of the suffering of billions. You fight the symptoms. I fight the disease. The disease is the celestial dragons. Their divine rule. The only way to truly save anyone is to cut the head off the snake. To climb the red line and burn Mary Geoise to the ground. It was a clash of ideologies, stark and absolute. Dragon, the global revolutionary, saw people as a means to an end, pawns in a grand, world-changing crusade. Naruto, the village protector, saw the individual lives, the faces in the crowd. He fought for the people he knew, for the home he stood on. Join me, Naruto Uzumaki, Dragon urged, his voice resonating with charismatic power. Lend your god-like strength to my cause. Together, we can drag the gods from their thrones and remake the world in the image of freedom. Naruto looked at Dragon, and for a moment, he understood the man's appeal. The sheer scale of his ambition was intoxicating. To end all suffering, to topple the ultimate evil. It was a goal worthy of a hero. But then he looked past Dragon, at the faces of the Gardone militia, at Hancock, whose hand now rested supportively on his back. He thought of his village, of the ramen shop, of his friends. He had always fought for the tangible, for the people he could see and touch. No, Naruto said, his voice quiet but firm as a mountain. Dragon's eyes narrowed. You would choose to be a king of a starving island over a liberator of the world. I'm not a king, Naruto corrected him. And I'm not a liberator. I'm a protector. I don't fight for an ideology, Dragon. I fight for my family. For my home. He gestured to the island. To Hancock, to the people watching. This is my home now. I will not sacrifice it for some grand, bloody crusade. I will build my nation, my sanctuary, right here. Chi will be a pillar of power so strong that it will stand on its own, a beacon of true freedom, not one born from a world of ash and revolution. He took a step forward, his own presence, a force of immense life and unshakable will. Pushing back against Dragon's stormy aura. I respect your goal, but my path is my own. I will not be a weapon in your war. Dragon stared at him for a long, silent moment. A revolutionary facing a force he could not sway with words or ideals. He saw not a potential soldier, but a rival power, a different kind of king. A slow, grim smile touched Dragon's lips. A pity, he said. The world could have used you. He turned to leave, his green cloak swirling around him. Then he paused. A word of advice, then. From one enemy of the gods to another. Your next opponent, Admiral Ryokugyu. His power comes from the very life force of the planet. A twisted version of what you sages touch. But that is not what makes him dangerous. He looked back, his eyes dark with a secret knowledge. The admirals are not the true threat. They are merely the guard dogs. The true monsters, the ones who sit on the empty throne, their power is not of this world. Be careful, Naruto Uzumaki. You have picked a fight with forces that predate this age of pirates. With that cryptic warning, Monkey D. Dragon was gone, vanishing into the shadows as mysteriously as he had arrived. His words lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Power not of this world. It echoed what Kurama had felt during the initial summoning. It hinted at a truth far darker and more complex than A.S. Impulse struggle against a corrupt government. But there was no time to dwell on it. As if Dragon's departure was a trigger, a new alert came from the watchtower, a frantic, terrified cry. Naruto-sama, Hebihime-sama, the fleet, the blockade is moving. Naruto and Hancock rushed to the cliffs. The scene below was terrifying. The entire marine fleet had broken formation. At their head, Ryokugyu's flagship was on a direct course for Gardoa. Its speed increasing. And flanking him were a dozen new figures. They flew through the air on black, leathery wings. They had the white hair and brown skin of the Lunarian race. Each one was identical, modeled after a different legendary figure. Naruto recognized a mold of Mihawk. He saw one that was a feminine, terrifying echo of Hancock herself. Another was a hulking brute that looked like a smaller version of Kaido. And at their head, flying beside Ryokugyu's ship, was a new S-Cage, its eyes glowing with a cold, predatory light. This wasn't just a squad. This was a legion of gods. Ryokugyu stood on the prow of his ship, a wide, fanatical grin on his face. He no longer looked lazy. He looked ecstatic, a predator finally allowed off his leash. He drew a long, black blade from a sheath on his back, one of the 12 supreme-grade swords, if Nyan's lessons were correct. His voice, amplified by the fleet's Den Den Mushi, boomed across the water, a final, chilling declaration of war. The waiting is over, Kitsune. He roared, his voice cracking with manic glee. My superiors have given the order. Your existence itself is a crime against nature. It is time for the heavens, judgment. It is time, for the purge. He pointed his blade at the island. The squadron of seraphim behind him ignited the flames on their backs, their collective power a terrifying, world-ending inferno. Naruto stood on the cliff's edge, Hancock at his side, her hand gripping his. Sandersonia and Marigold stood behind them, their weapons drawn. The Gardone militia, terrified but resolute, took up defensive positions throughout the town. He looked at Hancock, at the fierce, unwavering trust in her eyes. He looked at the home they had started to build. He looked at the approaching storm of gods and steel. The calm was over. He took a deep breath, and the world's natural energy surged into him. A golden aura of sage and fox fire erupted around him, a beacon of defiant life against the coming darkness. The divine storm had finally arrived. Chapter 7 End.